Chapter 1535. He had always wanted to apologize, but he had never had the courage to do so. It was like a thorn deep in his heart that he could not touch or express. www. Orgus long as he mentioned this word, it would evoke an unforgettable tragedy in his mind. Back then, when Muri fell in the Emperor's tribulation, it was not only a pain to the people of the Divine Palace, but it also left a scar in Shermu's heart that was difficult to heal. After the tragedy, everyone distanced themselves from him and criticized him behind his back. It was difficult for him to escape the mouths of the crowd. The words of reprimand were sharper than swords, more merciless than sabers. Every word pierced his heart. His heart had long been pierced full of holes, but not a single drop of blood flowed out. No one could understand the bitterness buried in his heart, but the pain was unspeakable. He once envied Eastern Sky and was indeed jealous of Eastern Sky, but he was not so bad as to hate because of jealousy. He knew very well what he was doing. Therefore, at that time, he did block the tribulation and try to save Muri. However, no one believed him. Even Eastern Sky, who had grown up since childhood, completely broke off their family friendship. He felt guilty and blamed himself. He lived in guilt from then on, and he could not forgive himself. The Seven Peak Masters deliberately avoided the pain because they did not believe that the Divine Palace was destroyed. Shermu was the same. His obsession made him forget the scene after the Emperor's tribulation. Now, he remembered. He remembered everything. He did save Muri. His efforts were not in vain. www. Org at this moment, the knot in Shermu's heart was completely untied. He was magnanimous and no longer felt nostalgic. He did not owe anyone anything, nor did he let anyone down. However, he still owed Qin Hao an apology. On the day of Daozong Peak, he was just venting the accumulated oppression of his obsession. He never thought of harming Qin Hao, but he did hurt him after all. Junior brother Qin, I'm sorry. A long-lost apology lingered in his ears. Qin Hao clenched his fists and trembled violently. Looking at the departing figures of his senior brothers, his heart trembled heavily. This was the second time he had heard someone apologize in the Divine Palace. Previously, Su Jin and Lan Qingwu were bewitched by Changhe Lo to play the demonic chaos song to kill Qin Hao. They also said sorry to him. Then, Lan Qingwu died. If possible, he would rather not apologize to others. This apology was too heavy. Streams of light flew toward Shenghua and took the place of the 7 defeated Peak Masters. Eastern Sky transformed into a Qilin divine beast. Dong Tian came from the Eastern Continent's Qilin Dao sect and was a disciple of a Dao sect. He had the Qilin bloodline, and that was his bloodline's source spirit. As for the Mountain River fortune diagram, it was something he was born with. It was his origin soul. He was the number 1 genius of the last batch of disciples. He was also a monster with 2 souls when he was alive. Eastern Sky's natal soul was extremely overbearing. Qin Hao and the others saw that as Dong Tian, who had transformed into a Qilin, let out a long roar. The Mountain River fortune painting suddenly emitted an emperor's aura. Heaven and earth changed color as endless spirit qi poured into the painting, swallowing everything as if it was turning into the great Tao of the heavens. Afterward, the will of the East Sky Emperor was integrated into the painting, and everything in heaven and earth changed according to his will. Frozen snow fell from the sky, and meteorites mixed with flames fell from the sky. Countless hurricanes blasted out from the painting, one after another. With a single thought, he could control everything in heaven and earth. How overbearing was the power of his natal soul. It could reverse the will of heaven. At this moment, everyone saw the glory of the number 1 disciple of the last batch of disciples in the Divine Palace. He was as magnificent as he was when he was alive. Roar! The fierce roar of the divine beast shook the heavens and the earth. The divine might turned into the great path of the heavens to suppress. The myriad manifestations of the universe blasted forward, completely burying Shenghua. At the same time, Zhan Xiong of the Mizar Palace opened the 9 palaces to fight Dili. Golden light pierced through the body of the will. His body became boundless. Like the Mizar War Elder, he turned into the body of the god of war. His battle spirit was soaring. He held a giant axe in his hand and chopped at Xianghua. Seeing this scene, Si Sand, Zhang Yi, Lei Jiao, and the others burst into tears. Even if it was a wisp of will, they still had the resolve to die to protect their junior brother. Boom! Monstrous evil energy rolled out, covering the sky and the sun. Under the evil energy's radiation, everything was turned into an evil body. The myriad manifestations of the universe technique was instantly shattered by the evil energy. Shenghua's figure was then revealed. He slapped at eastern sky. The evil light was like a huge wave, crushing everything. It blasted the Qilin divine beast far away, and the holy light around it dimmed. Clang! A sound of metal clanging rang out, shaking heaven and earth. Shenghua raised his hand and grabbed the axe that Zhang Xiong was chopping down. The evil energy swept forward, turning into raging evil flames that devoured everything, swallowing Zhang Xiong. Shenghua, Izue let out a tragic roar. The Guqin spirit under his palm burst forth with the sound of the great Tao. In the void, countless heavenly demon shadows danced. Each shadow held a weapon and flew forward, but it was difficult to pass through the evil energy barrier. The middle-aged Taoists of Changyu, Tian Ke, and Yin Yi Peak all released their primordial spirits. The Emperor's light urged their soul power, and several layers of rules and Tao pressure down, turning into an evil mountain to suppress and kill. Shenghua raised his head and revealed a contemptuous smile. With a wave of his sleeve, the monstrous evil energy rolled back and rushed into the sky. With one blow, the divine mountain was shattered. You were all inferior to me when you were alive. What can a bunch of trash do after death? His emotionless, evil eyes looked over. Countless evil black patterns gradually crawled on Shenghua's face. Under his gaze, a strange and incomparably powerful rule swept out. From behind him, pitch-black shadows appeared one after another. These shadows were very long. They did not have bodies, only a head. They appeared densely, swaying behind Shenghua's back. It was a frightening sight. Immediately after, the shadows of these heads wriggled out and lunged forward like giant pythons. They bit down on the obsessions of the 7 chief disciples. Many of the heads began to tear madly as they let out eerie laughter that was neither male nor female. They tore Zhang Xiong and the others into pieces, chewing madly and swallowing them. Senior Brother Changyu, Qin Hao shouted. On his body, the Emperor's silk swayed sorrowfully. He still remembered asking Changyu, Senior Brother, what is your wish? Changyu replied, I was an orphan and had no attachments. I just want to visit Miori's family and do something within my power. He had no attachments, but before he died and counterattacked, he left his last remnant to Qin Hao. Run, run. In the void, Tian Quan's thunderous roar resounded. Evil energy had bitten a hole in his huge chest. There were not many Dili left to maintain his will. Following the death of the chief of the 7 peaks, he shouted at Qin Hao with all his might. Shenghua was immediately attracted by this shout. His black-patterned face became excited. His face twisted and his mouth split open, becoming a bloody mess. His flesh and tendons flew everywhere. A bloody tongue curled out of his mouth like a python's tongue. It swept through the void and coiled around Tian Quan's huge body. With a tug, he dragged Tian Quan into his mouth. What's the point of having a strong, when you've lost your body and soul? I don't believe that I can't cleanse it completely. Shenghua's mouth split open and swallowed Tian Quan in a single gulp. Chapter 1536. Evil power filled the sky, gathering the power of all evil. Shenghua became the source of evil. Inside his body, there were tens of thousands of will of the way, gathering all evil into one. Those will of the way eventually evolved into a kind of rule, a pure rule that could refine all things and replace the heavenly way. Who could resist it? Migrez's body was destroyed, and his soul no longer existed. All that was left was a strand of nirvana will. But no matter how strong this strand was, it was far from being able to unleash the true Nirvana Emperor's power. Moreover, how could he fight against the evil Sheng Hua by himself? He couldn't defeat him when he was alive, and a strand of will couldn't defeat tens of thousands of evil thoughts. Daozong, Yao Guang, Tai Wei, and the other peak masters were the same. Just as Sheng Hua said, he had refined all things into one. Now his power had almost surpassed the Nirvana barrier and was developing toward a realm that no one knew of. Even if he hadn't become a true god under the heavenly way, he was equivalent to a god. After swallowing Migres, the laughter of countless evil spirits came out of Sheng Hua's body. He looked like he was enjoying the pleasure of eating. The endless evil power in his body instantly tore apart Migres's will, and then the evil power was replenished. Go, find a way to escape. Daozong's body was transparent, almost disappearing. No one could stop Sheng Hua. Whoosh! The bloody tongue suddenly attacked like a sharp arrow, piercing through the void, piercing through the transparent body of the Taoist scripture, and rolling into the bloody mouth of the Taoist scripture. Countless evil souls danced in the air. Strange skull-like figures stretched their long necks and frantically swept towards Yao Guang's position. The ugly souls and Yao Guang's appearance formed a strong contrast. The sky full of filthy monsters drowned Yao Guang. Seeing this, Chang Hello and the crowd almost fainted. He shouted desperately, "No!" Boom! The sound of the zither shattered, and Yao Guang's will of will exploded. Even if the will of will died, it wouldn't become a supplement for Sheng Hua's evil power. Ah! Chang Hello tore his hair and howled. His heart seemed to explode along with Yao Guang's self-destruction. Why? He had just regained his original heart and was ready to walk the righteous path. But at this time, Sheng Hua erased the belief that supported him. What was it for? The heavens were so cruel that they didn't even leave him a spiritual Pure Land. With this remnant will, I will shake the might of the divine palace and protect my disciple. Old Taoist Yuni roared. His body that was on the verge of disappearing disintegrated in the air, turning into countless halos of light that sprinkled over Sheng Hua's head. Finally, it formed an evil, suppressing pagoda that completely covered him. Above the pagoda, there was an intense array power flickering. In order to stop the sacred flower, Yun Yi's obsession turned into a formation. However, it was still useless. With just one punch, the array pagoda of obsessions was destroyed by Sheng Hua. In the next moment, the horrifying blood tongue flew out again, sucking Lord Tai Wei and Mizar War Venerable into the evil mouth at the same time. Evil power surged wildly, mixed with eerie laughter, and the obsessions of Lord Tai Wei and Mizar War Venerable disappeared. You're the only one left. Come, my disciple. Throw yourself into the embrace of the old man master has been waiting for you for a long time. Sheng Hua's head suddenly split open from the middle, spewing out an evil light. In the evil light, a weathered figure appeared, wearing the palace robes of the Xiantian Peak. It was the previous generation's old peak master, the master of the Xiantian deity master. Once, her master was unable to resist the temptation of the evil soul and was suppressed under the Yun Yi Peak by the other 6 peak masters. Then, he became a part of the evil source. Now, the master and disciple finally met again. Go to hell. The Xiantian deity master shouted crazily, evoking his pain. The previous generation's Xiantian Peak had fallen into the evil path, and it was a shame that the Xiantian Peak could not erase. She held the Haotian hammer in her hand, and the power of the great path swept out. The hammer light was like a heavy mountain, and the hammer light fell madly, wanting to smash the weathered figure into pieces. But at the same time, the bloody tongue from Sheng Hua's huge mouth once again flew forward, curling towards the Xiantian deity master. Boom! A majestic body slammed into the Xiantian deity master. Then, Sheng Hua's tongue curled around Tian Ke, pulled him back, swallowed him into his stomach, and refined him. Ah! The strong-willed Xiantian empress burst into tears at this moment. History repeated itself. She remembered deeply that on the day the Divine Palace was destroyed, Tion K had also slammed into her like this and died for her. He was her disciple, but he had always admired her and liked her. In order to let her focus on forging the 12 Divine Soldier, Tion K quietly took care of everything in the Shintian Peak for her. Until his death, he did not express his feelings. However, how could she not understand that she was still a human after all? Whoosh! A dazzling silver light swept across the broken Yun-E peak, and the bright brilliance gradually turned golden. As the flames rose, a pair of wings with 12 wings was reborn in the fire. Qin Hao had finally completely unsealed the Sagittarius Palace battle suit, restoring it to the Emperor level. Even though the implement spirit of the battle suit was long gone and its power had been reduced, at this moment, Qin Hao still put on the armor and went into battle. Those who were disciples of the Divine Palace, kill evil with me. Qin Hao's sonorous and powerful voice shook the hearts of everyone. Escape? The outer boundary of evil power was enveloped, and there was no way to escape. They could only fight to the death. Since Sheng Hua was the mastermind behind the scenes and the root of all evil, he would never let anyone go. The signs of the Divine Palace meant certain death. This curse was not groundless. Sheng Hua was the curse of the Divine Palace. Even if the incident of destroying the Matrix Source did not happen today, Qin Hao and the others would not be able to leave safely. The agreement with the palace flag was useless against Sheng Hua. Perhaps in his heart, he had already prepared to take advantage of the sparring session to wipe out the new disciples of the Seven Peaks. It was just that Qin Hao was one step faster. Chapter 1537. Dark clouds rolled, burying heaven and earth, like a huge coffin swallowing the Divine Palace, completely isolating it from the world. In the void, countless evil spirits were floating around with eerie laughter. They were hidden in the evil qi, and from time to time, their ugly heads would pop out from the dark clouds and stare at the people below, watching them struggle with an expression of enjoyment. There was a strong sense of oppression everywhere, causing everyone to feel stifled and unable to breathe. Although not a single corpse could be seen on the ruined Yun-E Peak, the scene that had been reduced to ruins was enough to prove that a fierce battle had taken place here. At this time, Qin Hao unsealed the archer battle suit, and the 12 wings on his back flapped gently. His body was surrounded by demonic flames, and he slowly floated up to the same height as Sheng Hua. Now, except for Xintian Peak, the obsessions of the 7 Peak Masters had all disappeared. Eastern Sky transformed into the Qilan Divine Beast, and his breath was constantly weakening. Dilly, who was not much left, was already difficult to maintain the obsessions. He no longer had any extra strength to protect the disciples of the Divine Palace. As for the other chief disciples, almost all of them had been killed by Sheng Hua. Witnessing all this, it was not that Qin Hao did not want to help, but that he was powerless to participate. He knew how terrifying Sheng Hua was now. But now, even if they did not resist, they had to resist. No one was protecting them anymore. If the boundary was not broken, they could not leave. If Sheng Hua did not die, no one could live. What followed was a battle for survival. If Sheng Hua did not die, everyone would be swallowed up, and even their souls would not be left. Even if they knew it was an egg hitting a stone, they had to fight. Those who were disciples of the Divine Palace, kill evil with me. A solemn and angry voice rolled through the 9 heavens, a roar from the depths of the soul. This roar made by the king's spirit reached everyone's ears, and it was deafening. Resistance was not only for survival, but also for the continuation of the will of the Divine Palace. Anyone who still thought they were disciples of the Divine Palace would kill evil with him. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Bright brilliance flashed one after another under the cover of the dark clouds. Groups of light were dazzling, sacred and tragic, constantly rising in the direction of Qin Hao. The person in the lead was clad in the golden scorpion battle armor. His entire body was shrouded in sword radiance. It was Shou Wuk from the southern region. Soon after, a person appeared with a golden bottle in his hand. Torrential water vapor filled the air, and when he rose into the air, the sound of the ocean's roaring could be heard. It was Yi Shuihan. www.ordmu. Sayogua's body expanded. His 5-meter-tall body was filled with power. He stood tall in the air, his golden armor dazzling like a Taurus war god. Magic Scorpion Palace, Zhanyi. Lion Palace, Sea Sand. Virgo Temple, Chun Wanqin. Pisces Palace, Shaohan. Even Zhou Wudao, who had just recovered from his heavy wounds and whose soul was still unstable, put on the broken Libra battle suit and joined everybody determinedly. On his Libra battle suit, there was a palm-shaped hole on his chest and back. It was a shocking sight. Other than that, 2 other figures rose into the air at the same time. One of them was clad in the Ares battle armor and exuded a noble aura. The other person's entire body was wrapped in a dazzling golden light. His figure and face could not be seen clearly. One could only vaguely see through the golden light that it was the Gemini golden armor. This person did not exude a powerful aura, but judging from his temperament, his cultivation was definitely not weaker than the other geniuses. He must have been a personal disciple of a peak venerable. However, because the Ares battle armor and the Gemini battle armor had their faces covered, no one could recognize who they really were. This is... The Xian Tian deity looked up in shock. The 11 golden battle suits floating in the air were the divine soldier that she had personally forged. She had prepared it as a gift for the new chief. This was the real divine soldier, not a figment of her obsession. On the day of the destruction of the divine palace, she was the only one who had escaped. Tian Ke had blocked a fatal blow for her. She had relied on the protection of the 12 divine soldier artifact spirits to escape. In the end, she had been seriously injured and her divine soul had been exhausted. She had died in the hidden dragon's secret realm, but her obsession had stopped at the moment when the divine palace was destroyed. Now, seeing the real 12 battle suits, Xian Tian deity's mind was blank. Martial uncle, don't be surprised. They are indeed your works. In the outside world, there was a very lucky guy who received your true teachings by chance. He inherited your forging method and the unique enchantment inheritance that you left behind. You have a successor. The divine palace's incense was not completely cut off with the destruction of his sect. Qin Hao's voice sounded in the void. He drew his bow and slightly tilted his body to face Shenghua. A golden arrow was placed on the bowstring. The sunset cultivation method imprinted in the depths of his soul circulated throughout his body. A destructive airflow was born in the arrow, spewing out blazing light. www.org at the same time, Shaohan, Sayogua, Yishuehan, Shouwuk, and the others all stood around Qin Hao. With the Sagittarius Palace as the center, the 12 zodiac palaces turned into a circular array. Within the array light, bright soul power was released one after another. The scene was extremely spectacular. The bloodline crown, the sword calamity lotus, the primitive azure ox, the water god's phantom, and the great golden ape resonated with the battle suits and transformed into the 12 zodiac phantoms. The Scorpio, Taurus, Pisces, and Level were vivid and reflected in the sky. Even the evil force haze in the void was penetrated by the rays of light. At this moment, the 12 zodiac phantoms resonated with the great Tao of heaven and earth. We still need one more Ning Chao fan. Qin Hao shouted to the sky below. At the same time, a figure directly rose from below without hesitation. Bright golden light was released around him. The Cancer Temple had responded to the summons. However, the person wearing the Cancer battle suit was not Ning Chao Fan, but the crown prince of the Ning Wu Empire, Ning Tianxing. Now is not the time to worry about the ownership of the battle suit. My power is stronger than Ning Chao Fan's. Ning Tianxing said directly to Qin Hao. After he finished speaking, 3 powerful soul powers appeared behind him. The bloodline flood dragon scissors, the Guqin spirit, and the 9-tailed phantom fox. Each of the soul powers flashed with powerful emperor will. At the same time, the huge phantom of the Cancer Temple soared into the sky and merged with the 12 zodiac phantoms in the sky. Qin Hao glanced at Ning Tianxing and frowned slightly. He had given the cancer battle suit to Ning Chaofan, but now it was being worn by the crown prince of the Ningwu Empire. The other party must have taken it by force. However, Ning Tianxing's cultivation was indeed much stronger than Ning Chaofan's and was more suitable to deal with the current situation. Good. I have nothing more to ask for in this life. Xiantian looked up at the 12 zodiac phantoms in the void. Endless light was dazzling, and all kinds of rules and Tao wills were converging toward the Sagittarius Palace in the center. They were trying to condense everyone's power on the golden arrow. However, Xiantian could see that because of the lack of a weapon spirit, the 12 zodiac phantoms had lost the medium to merge. No matter how hard Qin Hao and the others tried, they could not merge the 12 Tao wills. Whoosh! At this moment, Xuantian's obsession dispersed, turning into countless light spots that flew into the void and merged into the 12 zodiac phantoms battle suit. The divine soldier was created by her, and no one knew better than her how to use it correctly. Now that the weapon spirit was missing, she would fill it with her obsession. With a buzz, heaven and earth trembled. The moment Xuantian's obsession merged into the 12 zodiac phantoms, it was as if there was an invisible string that connected them, and they all seemed to come alive. Qin Hao and the others could clearly sense the power of rules that existed between them. The Tao wills did not seem to belong to individuals, but to them as a whole. Each of them could drive the other's power. Gathering the 12 Tao wills and giving them to one person, thereby obtaining power that surpassed the limits of martial arts. This concept was exactly the same as the evil source. But the difference was that Xiantian used the way of forging to complete it, and used the divine soldier to gather everyone's power. The evil source, on the other hand, devoured the Tao of others. Farewell, Lord Xiantian Peak. Qin Hao let out a long and solemn roar. The 12 Tao wills on the tightened arrow rose and condensed crazily, and the vibrating destructive power seemed to be able to destroy the heavens. Xiantian used her obsession to fill the weapon spirit, giving them a chance to merge their Tao wills. After this arrow, there would be no more Empress Xiantian in the world. Farewell, Uncle Master. Xiao Han and the others choked and shouted in unison. At this moment, the people watching below were all shocked. Even the obsession of the last peak venerable had sacrificed himself and turned into a weapon spirit just to open a gap for them to survive. Then, what reason did they have not to fight against Shanghua? Are they all dead? We should do something. Su Jin stepped out. The childish appearance of Gooden was no longer on his face, and only the temperament that belonged to Su Jin was left. The flute spirit appeared and was placed under his lips. The melodious sound of the flute played the counterattack of the disciples of the Seven Peaks. Thunder punishment. Qingji Han pointed to the sky, and the will of the emperor rose and communicated with the great path. A terrifying thunder cloud formed in the blink of an eye, and flashing infernal thunder wandered among the clouds. As the clouds moved, the infernal thunder struck down and fell on Shenghua's head. At the same time, the disciples of the Seven Peaks all released their primordial spirits. Soul light covered the sky, and countless beasts, weapons, and weapon spirits were born like a shower, all bombarding Shanghua. Even though they were unable to fuse many Tao techniques into one like Qin Hao's group of 12, but with so many attacks descending upon them, their might was extremely ferocious. They should be able to more or less weaken a portion of the evil power of the holy light for Qin Hao. You ants want to go against the god? Shenhua looked on coldly. In the face of the overwhelming attack, he was unmoved. His gaze only fell on Qin Hao, who was in the 12 ecliptic formations. He had once given Qin Hao a chance to leave. He said, "The world is so big, where can't you cultivate? Why must you enter the divine palace?" Qin Hao replied, "Everywhere in the world can cultivate. Why can't you cultivate in the divine palace? Since you insist on entering, then you must pay the price." The evil light in Shenghua's eyes intensified. He punched forward, and the powerful will of the fist filled with evil power froze the space. The disciples of the Seven Peaks released hundreds of Tao wills, but all of them fell into the space, unable to take half a step past the evil power. Even Qing Jihan's infernal thunder stopped above Shenghua's head, unable to strike down. Then there was a shattering sound. The Tao wills that fell into the space dissipated. Shenghua raised his eyes slightly and stared at the infernal thunder in the air. The power of his gaze destroyed the huge thundercloud. Qing Jihan covered her eyes with both hands, and blood flowed between her fingers. She had been invaded by the most terrifying intent in history. Just now, her will of the emperor had gathered the thundercloud, and her will stood in the air. Just by looking at Shenghua, she felt that her soul was about to be torn apart by a powerful evil power. Her eyes burned with pain, as if her eyes had been dug out. She, who had the eye of devastation, only had the will to dominate others. But Shenghua's gaze could dictate her life and death. With a cry, the disciples of the Seven Peaks all spat out blood. One by one, their bodies collapsed to the ground, paralyzed. Their eyes were filled with indescribable fear. Just now, a wave of telekinesis had pressed down, and a terrifying shadow of an evil god had appeared in their minds. They had worked together to release hundreds of Tao wills, but they had all been destroyed by Shenghua's will. This was such a domineering power. It was as if a true god had dominated the heavenly path. Under the heavenly path, nothing could exist. Shenghua, a roar like thunder, split the sky. In the air, a dazzling golden arrow pierced through, carrying a destructive air current. It shot toward the center of the 12 ecliptic formations. Chapter 1538. The golden arrow flew through the void, and the 12 rules turned into a destructive force that shot toward Shenghua. The entire process seemed slow, and every minute and every second was torture for everyone. However, this flying arrow gave off the feeling that it ignored space and distance, and moved toward Shenghua as if it was teleporting. That was Xiao Han's rule, spatial teleportation. In addition, there was an endless sharp light at the front of the arrow that could pierce through everything. It was Shou Wu's rule of swordsmanship. Yi Shuihan, Xiaogua, Si Sand, Qin Hao, and Qin Wanqin had all integrated their rules into the arrow. This attack had both the roaring of the sea and the endless power, as well as the overbearing power that could destroy all things. It could be said that it truly reflected the strongest advantage of the 12 people. Life or death, it all depended on this arrow. Shenghua stared ahead, quietly watching the arrow fly over. His eyes reflected the light that was getting closer and closer. Although this attack had gathered the rules of the 12 people, and many advantages as one, its power was extremely great. Moreover, the battle suits could resonate with each other, imperceptibly increasing the power by a large margin. Even a great emperor would have to take this arrow seriously. However, it was still not enough for Shenghua. This was no longer something that could be made up for by numbers. The gap between their realms had caused a serious imbalance. The difference in cultivation was too great, and there was no suspense. Even with the 12 rules, it was impossible to shake him. Shenghua clearly knew this, but he still felt a trace of threat from the arrow. Boom! In a flash, the arrow pierced through the void and pierced through his body. Shenghua did not block it. He looked down at himself. In the center of his evil body's heart, there was a fist-sized hole. The wound gave birth to a flame that was raging and burning. It was extremely overbearing. The wound continued to expand, and the wound grew bigger and bigger until it swallowed half of his body. Pain, the feeling that came from the depths of his soul, spread. It had been too long since he had tasted it. On the day of the destruction of the Divine Palace, even Migrez at his peak cultivation did not give Shenghua such a feeling. On the contrary, today, in Qin Hao's hands, he experienced pain once again. It was like an ordinary person being cut by a knife. It was real pain. Among the 12 people, one of their laws is capable of directly destroying my origin. Shenghua lowered his head and watched the injury spread. The pain in his soul gave him a sense of pleasure. He was a little excited. He could feel that the arrow contained some kind of power that could cause real harm to his evil body. It was a kind of fundamental damage. This proved that there was someone in the world who could truly threaten him. There were still some flaws in his strength. It's a pity that it's still too weak. I might as well use it to strengthen myself. Sheng Hua's evil eyes widened, his face full of greed. If he refined the power that hurt him, would it prove that he was the perfect Wuk, comparable to the way of the heavens? Boom! Endless evil power erupted. In the void, groups of evil spirits pounced on Sheng Hua crazily. They merged into his body and healed his injuries. The hole in his heart was gradually mended. What surprised Sheng Hua even more was that the healing speed of the wound was much slower than usual. It proved that the arrow carried some kind of power that had the effect of suppressing his evil power. How could this not make him excited? After refining those 12 people, he could cast the most perfect evil body, replace the way of the heavens, and become a true god. Destroy. In the blink of an eye, Sheng Hua, who had half of his body destroyed, was restored to its original state. Monstrous evil thoughts rushed forward. His will shrouded the void. It was as if an evil house had descended above Qin Hao and the others. Endless evil power strangled down. The void shook, and the great path wailed. At this moment, Qin Hao and the others felt a stormy attack crushing them. Waves of terrible power directly penetrated their armor and penetrated their meridians and internal organs. The people below saw that the 12 people were wrapped in dense evil light. Tragic cries rang out. The shadows of Horizontal, Pisces, Lion, Scorpio, and others that appeared in the sky all collapsed and dissipated. With one blow, Sheng Hua had destroyed the power of the 12 palaces. It was over. It was completely over. As the bodies in broken battle suits continued to fall from the sky, the survivors lost their last glimmer of hope. What awaited them next would be eternal damnation. Wah! Ning Tianxing spat out blood. He could no longer feel the existence of his limbs. His spiritual soul seemed to have been shattered into thousands of pieces. If he hadn't activated the nine-tailed phantom fox at the critical moment to block the killing force for everyone, the 12 people would have become corpses at this moment. Even so, the power of his phantom fox was completely defeated. They had completely lost the ability to resist. Before coming, Ning Tianxing didn't believe it. He wanted to break the curse and become the creator of miracles. However, when he faced Sheng Hua, there was only endless despair left in his heart. Was he unwilling? Of course not. He hadn't become a peerless great emperor. He hadn't expanded his territory and led the Ning clan to the top of the continent. How could Crown Prince Ning Wu accept dying in the hands of others without leaving behind his spiritual soul? At this time, I don't believe that you don't have a trump card. Ning Tianxing spat out blood and roared crazily. Then, a dazzling golden light flew out from his falling body and blasted toward Sheng Hua like a meteor. The Primeval Dipper, an emperor-level magic item of the third branch of the Ning clan, was a treasure. It was infinitely mysterious and could contain all the treasures in the world. It was said that once the golden light came out, it would be difficult to escape. Grandmaster, please. Ning Tianxing let out a last cry for survival in despair. Buzz. The Primeval Dipper flew out, and a white-haired old man walked out of the light. He was the leader of the third branch of the Ning clan. His status was on par with Ning Songsong, the Grandmaster of the Ningwu Empire. He was also a peerless powerhouse who had stepped into the second stage of the Emperor's Way. Grandmaster, please. Zhou Wudao spat out blood, and at the same time cried for help. Accompanied by his cry, a huge brush whizzed out of his body and turned into a majestic figure. It was the Grandmaster of the Great Zhou Empire, one of the main culprits who once killed Qin Hao in the Valley of the Gods, Zhou Wendy. Zhou Wendy had also stepped into the second stage of the Emperor's Way, but the aura on his body was stronger than that of the Ning family's Grandmaster. Grandmaster, please. Grandmaster, please. Grandmaster, please. Grandmaster, please. A series of heart-wrenching cries rang through the sky. Those who dared to participate in the Divine Palace's sign were all from powerful families. Their families had existed for countless years. Furthermore, the last 500 or so people who were left were the elites of those who had stepped into the fallen Emperor Bey's sign. Their families were even more powerful. Accompanied by the hoarse cries for help, old figures continued to appear in the void. In an instant, the void was densely packed, and there were more than 100 Grandmaster-level powerhouses gathered. Each of these figures was an Emperor-level existence. Of course, they were able to appear here out of thin air, not because they had come in person, but because their descendants had been branded with Emperor's will by their family elders before the sign. Now, the hundreds of figures in the void were a wisp of Emperor's will from each family's elders. It was to ensure the safety of their descendants. Fight! 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 Cries for the Grandmasters rose and fell one after another. Some people also took out their family's Emperor's weapons. Of course, there were also some people who did not prepare their trump cards, such as Qin Hao, Shou Wuk, Xiao Han, and so on. They came to the sign to prove their strength. They were also very confident and had absolute pride. They would not rely on their elders. At this time, the hundreds of figures in the void exuded the aura of the great emperors. The emperor's light was dazzling, and the emperor's weapons whistled through the air. Even though it was just a wisp of emperor's will, the magnificent scene was enough to make one's blood boil. It was definitely rare to see 100 great emperors gathered together. Who dares to hurt my grandson? It was unknown which family's grandmaster spoke first. The aura of a first-level great emperor surrounded him. He was a Tao-proving emperor. But soon, the grandmaster of this family felt that something was wrong. He looked around and saw that the figures of the great emperors were everywhere. A few of them had extremely powerful emperors, while that far surpassed his own. Shenhua was also shocked by the scene before him. So many great emperors' wills had descended for no reason. Then, the hundreds of great emperors present panicked. When they felt the evil force emanating from Shenhua, the intensity of the emperors was like a group of Yuan masters meeting a Yuan king. The two sides were not on the same level at all. My grandson's life is over. Zhou Wendy sighed. A brush appeared in his hand. He drew a stroke and triggered the great Tao's might. A wisp of sharp emperor's light appeared in the void and slashed toward Shenhua like a domineering blade. Qin Xingrun, the Grandmaster of Marshal Ning's third lineage, only had the chance to shout this sentence. A buzzing sound was heard. The space was imprisoned by a powerful force. Evil force permeated the air. Before Zhou, when he could attack, he saw a giant net pressing down. In an instant, hundreds of great emperors were entangled in it. They could not resist at all. Shenhua laughed happily. Endless evil force rolled up. His head transformed into a giant skull and swallowed the hundreds of great emperors in the net. He did not even chew. As the evil force in his body surged, the hundreds of great emperors' wills were devoured and refined. In the end, Shenhua spat in disgust. Inferior. The great emperors of the outside world were naturally not as strong as the cultivators of the divine palace. Moreover, they had only descended as a wisp of will. Everyone witnessed all this. He had swallowed hundreds of great emperors in one gulp. Originally, they had hoped that their grandmaster could do something, but who would have thought that they were in despair? They were so desperate that they were numb. Now, who could stop Shenhua? Give up. Become one with me. Only then can you realize the value of your lives. Shenhua waved his sleeve. A huge storm was born between heaven and earth. The storm swept across the peak and sucked in all the figures on the ground. They fell toward the place where the sky-reaching jade pillar had collapsed. Now, that place was a bottomless evil den. Refining living people, naturally, could not be like refining the obsession of Migres. If one wanted to completely integrate the will of the living, they had to be completely disintegrated from the root and the spiritual soul. The evil den was the birthplace of the evil source, and it was also the embryo that provided the power for Shenhua. Only by throwing in the living people present and nurturing them could they achieve the same origin as Shenhua. Whoosh! Including Qin Hao, the storm swept across. Everyone on the ground was swept clean and fell into the evil den. What followed next was true despair. Little brother. In the void in the distance, Eastern Sky's incorporeal obsession was on the verge of dissipating. He had witnessed the tragedy with his own eyes, but he could no longer do anything. The tragedy of the Divine Palace had repeated itself. Back then, he could not stop it. Now, he still could not save Qin Hao. Is it painful? Shenhua looked coldly at Eastern Sky. At this moment, he seemed to have returned to his original self. He had changed back to the original Shenhua, but in his cold eyes, there was no trace of pity, only endless joy. Who said that Eastern Sky was the strongest in the Divine Palace? He, Shenhua, was the strongest. Eastern Sky. Miori, she is back. A weak voice came from somewhere. Shermu, whose lower body had completely disappeared, tried to float in the direction of Eastern Sky. It was as if he wanted to return to the other party, to return to their original appearance. But in the end, Shermu did not get his wish. His remnant thoughts only floated halfway before completely disappearing. However, at the same time, an incomparably powerful Golden Emperor's light appeared. The light was so dazzling that it dispersed all the endless evil aura that shrouded Yunyi Peak. It firmly blocked the top of the evil den and prevented the storm from falling. Chapter 1539. Boom! It was as if the sky had collapsed and the earth had sunk. Blocked by the Emperor light, the storm was shaken into nothingness, and countless bodies scattered from it like a handful of beans thrown to the ground. Qin Hao and the others fell one after another. Their heads seemed to explode, and their souls were shaken. The impact was too strong. At this moment, everyone looked forward in shock. In front of them, there was a woman floating in midair, wearing the green robes of Migre's palace. The white gold emperor light around her was blazing, and her aura was indescribably strong. The entire Yunyi Peak trembled under her emperor's might. Unblemished emperor, its senior sister. Qin Hao couldn't help but shout. It was her, Miori. The third disciple of Migre's palace had died in the memories of countless people of the previous generation in the Divine Palace. Now she was back. Qin Hao's emperor spirit was reborn. With the eyesight of his previous life Stendi, he could naturally distinguish Miori's realm. She was the third realm of the emperor's path, unblemished emperor. After all, he had also cultivated to this realm in his previous life. Miori was a true, unblemished emperor. But at this time, Miori's emperor's might was too strong, far surpassing the pressure of Migre's and the others. Qin Hao also knew very well that it was because the peak masters of Migre's only had a remnant of their will. Even if their martial arts realms were still at nirvana, they couldn't exert the power of nirvana. Miori was completely different. She was a living person. Her emperor body and divine soul were both present. If the peak masters of Migre's were said to be a group of paper tigers, but they were strong on the outside and weak on the inside, Miori was a real emperor, and her emperor's might was naturally more vivid and abundant. Miali didn't pay attention to Qin Hao. She glanced at the broken Yunyi Taoist peak, feeling the fragmented auras left by the lingering wills of the peak masters. She had mixed feelings, and an indescribable pain began to spread from the bottom of her heart. It was too late. She tried her best to restore her true body, but she still couldn't catch up and see Migre's and the other Uncle Masters for the last time. Even if she knew that the Uncle Masters only left behind a trace of their will, she still wanted to see her old friends for the last time. In the next instant, she looked at a certain spot in the void. When her gaze fell, her body trembled slightly. In that position, there was a person she was most familiar with, a face that was carved into her soul. Even though that person's figure had become very blurry and could no longer be maintained, she still recognized that it was Eastern Sky. Eastern Sky looked at Miori at the same time. His handsome face, which had almost disappeared, was replaced by the most gentle smile in the world. When their eyes met, he didn't open his mouth to speak because there were too many things he wanted to say. There were thousands of things he wanted to say, but he didn't know where to start. He could only bid her farewell with his eyes. Drip! A pair of teardrops fell from the sky, sparkling and translucent, onto Muri's face. Even though he didn't say a single word, she understood. From Eastern Sky's eyes, she understood a voice. Live on, and take good care, junior brother. Whoosh! With his obsession exhausted, Eastern Sky dissipated between heaven and earth. A peerless genius of a generation with unparalleled talent. In the end, he didn't have the chance to realize his ambitions. But at the moment of his demise, Eastern Sky had no regrets. At least in the fictional dream, he had one more junior brother, Qin Hao, who was like him, also had unparalleled talent. Moreover, the junior sister that he had been thinking about was not dead. It turned out that Shirmu had never lied to him. Then it was time for him to go back and find Shirmu. A heart-wrenching cry resounded through the 9 heavens. Muri's flawless emperor's aura surged through heaven and earth. The raging platinum light in her body made even the great path of the heavens tremble. Boulders on Uni Peak, which was reinforced by layers of arrays, cracked and fell madly one by one. After a long cry, Muri calmed herself down. Her red and cold eyes stared at Shenghua, who was filled with evil qi. I always knew that someone had escaped, Shenghua said faintly. His face was calm, and his heart was unruffled. It was as if he was meeting an old friend. On the day that the Divine Palace was destroyed, the evil source broke through the arrays. The Divine Palace was shrouded in thousands of evil spirits. Blood flowed like a river. 7 peak venerables died in battle one after another. No one survived. Shenghua could not bear the fear and bowed to the evil source. He offered his soul and completely merged with it, becoming a part of the evil source. However, he had hidden the Divine Palace for so many years. He had watched the obsessions of the 7 peak venerables repair the Divine Palace bit by bit and begin to train new disciples. It was as if everything had returned to the beginning. However, Shenghua could feel that among these dead obsessions, there was a very special aura. He did not know who had escaped, and there was no way to catch that person. Until now, he finally knew that it was Muri. Shirmu successfully blocked the Emperor's trial for you, Shenghua said with a smile. Shenghua said with a chuckle. The trash who had fallen into the heart demon test because of guilt did not lie. But what makes me curious is what method you use to shield the breath of a living person. Even the power of the spirit cannot sense it. This was what puzzled Shenghua the most. It was as if the whole person had been reduced to nothingness, but could still exist. You want to know the answer? Muri's tone was extremely cold. She gritted her teeth and said word by word, "When you die, everything will be clear." As soon as she finished speaking, endless platinum radiance engulfed the void. Along with a cry, a legendary divine phoenix flew out from behind Miao Li's back and hovered above the 9 heavens. The might of the phoenix descended like a real divine bird. In an instant, heaven and earth fell into the burning flames, and all things were swallowed up by the endless sea of fire. As a disciple of the Migres Palace, you must have a way to break the barrier and escape. Muri's voice shook in Qin Hao's mind, impacting every nerve in his body. Qin Hao saw that the phantom of the divine phoenix above the 9th heaven merged with Muri. The moment her soul entered her body, the will of the emperor between heaven and earth became stronger. It was as if she had become a living divine bird, the divine bird. She stretched out her boundless wings and rolled up the power of the great path's flames to burn Shenghua. That's true, but how can I break it? Qin Hao complained in his heart. He knew that his senior sister was fighting with Shenghua, and this battle must be extremely dangerous. She had no time to take care of them. However, that barrier was a Nirvana-level formation after all. He was not even an ordinary little Yuan emperor. So how could he break the Nirvana-level formation above the Great Emperor? Why don't we try to form the 12 ecliptic arrays again? Xiaoguo said. Martial Uncle Xintian filled the artifact spirit with his obsession, so he was able to make the battle suit resonate temporarily and communicate with the soul power and rules of the 12 of us. That arrow completely exhausted Martial Uncle's strength. How can we form the 12 ecliptic arrays again? Yi Shuihan looked at Xiaoguo and said, Not to mention that they were all seriously injured and their strength was not as strong as before. Moreover, if they formed the 12 ecliptic arrays, could they break the Nirvana level barrier? Obviously, it was impossible. Their combined strongest attack couldn't even destroy Shenghua's evil body. How could they break the evil force barrier when they were so weak? That great empress fought Shenghua with the belief that she would die. It seems that she won't be able to hold on for long. Shou Wuke glanced at the battle situation. The battle was extremely fierce, but this was the first time he saw Miori, so he couldn't get used to her identity. How did she suddenly become Qin Hao's senior sister? Ha! It seems that we are all going to be buried here, Ning Tianxing said sadly, looking at the Chaos Origin Golden Dipper in his hand. The Chaos Origin Golden Dipper was branded with a wisp of the Emperor's will of the great ancestor of the Ning family's third lineage. But even if the great ancestor of the Ning family descended, he could only tremble in front of Shenghua. Now that they were at the end of their rope, there was really no way to go. Zhou Wudao's head drooped, and his face was ashen. He awakened the founding great emperor of the great Zhou royal family, but he was also swallowed by Shenghua. When he was in the great Zhou, he thought that the great ancestor was the heavens. With the great ancestor, no one and nothing in the world could threaten the Zhou family. But today, after seeing Shenghua's power, Zhou Wudao suddenly felt that Zhou Wendy was like a child. Shou Wuke secretly clenched his fists, and his mood wasn't much better than Zhou Wudao's. Even if his uncle, the Sword Emperor of the Southern region, came in person, he probably wouldn't be able to withstand one move from Shenghua. But at this moment, who would really be willing to accept their fate and die? There were more than 500 people, and every one of them could be called the top pride of the continent. In the outside world, they were so dazzling, and a word from them could determine the lives of thousands. But now, they were like a group of frightened roosters, without any fighting spirit. Qin took a deep breath and looked at the center of the peak. There, huge rocks had collapsed, and there was an open abyss. Monstrous evil qi was emerging from the abyss, and it made people tremble. However, just as Qin Hao was about to be pulled into the storm, a strong desire arose in his heart, and there seemed to be a voice in his heart urging him to go down. It was obviously a dangerous place that nurtured the source of evil. So why did he have such a strange feeling? Buzz! The storage ring on his finger flashed with a halo, and in Qin Hao's mind, a faint sound of wind echoed, as if telling him something. Then, Qin Hao's body trembled violently, and he pointed to the evil cave and said, "I have to go down." One of the 9 elements of the desolate era, the wind form of the apocalyptic wind, existed in the evil cave. It was not an illusion. The sound of wind in his mind was the call of Feng Yuan. Qin Hao accidentally found Feng Yuan in the illusory Palace Crimson Flame world, but Feng Yuan had lost its wind form. Now, the wind form was in the evil cave that nurtured the source of evil. How could Qin Hao not be surprised? The power of the apocalyptic wind that had not been refined into a primordial spirit was immeasurable, and it had the destructive power to kill an unblemished emperor. Qin Hao had experienced it deeply in his previous life. Go to the evil cave, find the wind form, and merge it with Feng Yuan to form the complete power of the apocalyptic wind. Maybe with it, he could break the boundary of evil. Are you crazy? Lei Jiao looked at Qin Hao in disbelief, and his eyes were filled with horror. That was the evil cave, where the evil spirits of the peak masters and genius disciples of the divine palace gathered. Eventually, tens of thousands of evil spirits nurtured the source of evil. For everyone, it was a deadly place, and they could not avoid it. But Qin Hao wanted to go down. Lei Jiao began to suspect that Qin Hao was infected by the evil power of Shenghua, and wanted to abandon his self-belief and jump down to become part of the source of evil. One Shenghua was already a disaster. If there was another demonized Qin Hao, then Lei Jiao trembled more and more, and he did not dare to think about it. Jump down, and you can find the power to destroy the boundary. Qin Hao did not want to expose the secret of the desolate 9 elements. It was too important to him. Brother Qin Hao, Xiao Han was very nervous. Qin Hao interrupted her and said seriously, I will not become the source of evil. Believe me, I will go down with you. Showuk took a step forward and stood side by side with Qin Hao. From the beginning to the end, he had always recognized Qin Hao as a person. He was a person worthy of respect, but also a person who made people feel helpless. He admired him because he was very strong, but he also felt helpless because he was very strong. His uncle had said that if he met someone who was more outstanding than himself, he should acknowledge the other person's excellence and become friends with him, but never become enemies with him. But no matter what, after being together for a long time, Qin Hao was definitely not the kind of person who would give up his beliefs easily. He had more pride than others. If what he sensed was true, then there must be something in the evil cave that could destroy the boundary. But the evil cave was too dangerous. If they let Qin Hao bear it alone, it would seem that they were too heartless. No, you all stay here. If I don't come back, at least you all have a chance to leave here alive. Qin Hao seriously looked at each familiar face. His eyes were filled with the righteousness of sacrificing himself for the sake of righteousness. It was a solemn and stirring feeling. He said in a parting tone, "Finally, I, Qin Hao, am glad that I was able to make friends with all of you. I have no regrets in this life. If there is an afterlife, let us be brothers again." After that, he turned into a raging flame and fell into the evil cave. Chapter 1540. His body was ablaze as he threw himself into the evil cavern. This scene was so heroic that it struck the hearts of everyone present. Qin Hao faintly sensed that there was some kind of power in the evil cavern. Perhaps he could rely on that power to break the enchantment. Regardless of whether his senses were accurate or not, how many people present could compare with his courage to throw himself into the evil cavern? If Qin Hao's avatar had broken Ning Tianxing's rules and will, then his act of sacrificing himself to save everyone was far beyond Ning Tianxing's. Even if Qin Hao's starting point was to save himself, once he broke the enchantment, wouldn't he be saving everyone's lives? In contrast, Ning Tianxing was facing the evil cavern and the enchantment. His will had dissipated, and he was sighing about his fate. How could he have the elegance of Crown Prince Ningwu, who was worthy of the position of #1 in the Divine Palace? Everyone knew clearly in their hearts. If Qin Hao was lucky enough to come back alive and successfully break the enchantment, everyone would remember his kindness and repay it. Of course, Qin Hao didn't know what kind of changes his jump had caused above. He only knew that only by merging with the complete power of the wind of misfortune could he have a chance to escape for the Divine Palace. And on the surface, he was not pretending to be impassioned. This trip was very dangerous, and he knew in his heart that he might not be able to come back. The evil cavern under the suppression of the Peak of the Path was the burial place of the old peak lords of the Divine Palace who had stepped onto the evil path, as well as many peerless spirits. Thousands of evil spirits merged into the will of Wei and became the source of evil, giving birth to a monster like Shenghua. This was Shenghua's lair. How could ordinary people step in? Qin Hao dared to go down because he had the wind element of the wind of misfortune in his hand. If he could successfully withdraw the wind form and combine the two, he would have a powerful trump card in his hand. At least he would not die here so easily. But this was only his guess. How terrible was the evil cavern that gave birth to Shenghua? He was not sure whether he could withstand it. His body fell all the way down as if there was no end. The Red Lotus Overlord fire burned fiercely, illuminating the environment inside the evil cavern. Even the most powerful deviant fire in the mortal world could not resist the coldness of the evil cavern. Qin Hao only felt a terrifying coldness seeping into the flames and directly acting on his body. Even his soul felt stiff and incomparably cold. This evil cavern was far bigger and deeper than he had imagined. It was as if the entire Yun Peak had been hollowed out, leaving only its outer shell behind. Everything inside had been reduced to a storage room for evil forces. The inside of the evil cavern was filled with jagged rocks and grotesque shadows, crawled on the walls like the incarnations of evil spirits. The evil qi was extremely strong, far purer than the evil qi on Xianghua's body. Being in the boundless evil abyss, even Qin Hao, who was reborn as a great monarch, couldn't help but feel despair. This place was too terrifying. It was like being abandoned by the world, gathering all the negative elements. If it was someone else who came here, they would definitely have a mental breakdown and be assimilated by the evil, becoming a part of the source of evil. If I have enough power, I will definitely destroy this evil cavern. Qin Hao steadied his mind and silently recited the heart meditation mantra. Although the main purpose of this heaven-grade monarch art was to resist the invasion of music, it could also slay one's heart demons, temper one's Tao heart, and cleanse one's divine soul. At the same time, it could also restrain evil thoughts. The evil qi in the evil cavern was too strong. He was afraid that he wouldn't be able to withstand it and would be infected by the evil forces. Qin Hao didn't know how long he had fallen, but he felt that it was longer than the time he was tortured by the 9 heavens gods' punishment array. Even though he tried his best to maintain his Tao heart, his consciousness gradually weakened. Fortunately, Feng Yuan finally sensed the wind. There! Qin Hao lowered his head and looked down. This single glance caused one's entire spirit to go numb. Countless strands of blood were entwined below like thick blood vessels. One end was attached to the rock wall, while the other end was gathered at the center of the ground. They were densely packed together and began to vibrate rhythmically. The countless blood vessels even vibrated at the same frequency. Blurg! Even though Qin Hao had been stained with the blood of countless enemies and had personally led an army into battle in his previous life, he still couldn't help but vomit. It was too disgusting. There was nothing more disgusting than the scene in front of him. Countless thick blood vessels intertwined and formed an ugly heart in the center, making loud, thumping sounds. Feng Yuan, hurry up. Qin Hao couldn't bear to look down. He took out the great void divine sword and swung it down. Above the heart formed by countless blood vessels, there was a whirlpool of air current. That whirlpool of air current twisted crazily, strangling everything. The endless evil forces in the evil cavern were continuously sucked into it. It was like a creation field, sucking in the evil forces of different rules and Tao wills, twisting them into a ball, and finally injecting them into the heart. So this was how the source of evil was born. It was forcefully broken by the wind of misfortune and then merged into one. Such a strange idea caused even Qin Hao to start feeling admiration. Gather the power of all things and turn it into a second great path. Break the shackles and replace it. At this time, the evil soul's words echoed in Qin Hao's mind. What it said seemed crazy, but it seemed to be right. Xianghua was the best proof. The evil force was indestructible, and the evil fetus's aura was almost beyond that of an emperor's body. It exuded the same pressure as the blood essence of a god. It wanted to create a god's body. The evil soul and the body merged to become a real god. Qin Hao thought about himself. Wasn't his body the same? Under the broken dragon cliff, the senior who left the blood essence of a god burned Qin Hao's body with the red lotus fire and gathered the spiritual qi of all things to reconstruct his body. Now his body was only a demigod. Even so, Qin Hao knew better than anyone else how strong his demigod body was. The evil source's backup evil fetus was already stronger than his demigod body. Otherwise, Qin Hao would not feel such intense pressure. Buzz. Suddenly, there was a searing pain in his chest, as if his heart was about to melt. A vast and boundless power of the gods and demons rippled out from Qin Hao's chest, enveloping the entire evil cavern. The entire evil cavern trembled, and the gushing power swept towards the evil fetus below. Without giving Qin Hao any time to think, it was as if a giant hand was born out of thin air, grabbing the ugly heart and crushing it, causing blood and gore to splatter everywhere. Then, the powerful power of the gods and demons rolled the evil fetus back, turning it into a beam of light and returning to Qin Hao's heart. It was as if his heart had been pierced and torn apart. There was an irresistible force in his body that almost made Qin Hao's spirit explode. In an instant, A huge amount of evil force spread throughout his body, filling every inch of his flesh. From afar, one could see a blurry, blood-red body growing bigger and bigger from Qin Hao's heart. It gradually overlapped with his shadow until it completely merged. The evil fetus that Shanghua had painstakingly cultivated after tens of thousands of years had been swallowed by the blood of the gods and demons. It had even merged with Qin Hao's demigod body. But at this moment, Qin Hao didn't have the slightest bit of excitement. He felt that his spirit was about to collapse. Endless evil force was eroding his spirit, trying to devour him. He hugged his head and let out an intense cry. His body was distorted beyond recognition. His cry was earth-shattering. The entire underground cave was shaking crazily. A painful dragon's roar spread towards the exit and hit the sky. Even Shanghua, who was fighting fiercely with Miao Li outside, could hear it clearly. "My evil body." Shanghua let out an equally tragic cry. In the next second, he abandoned Muri as if he had gone crazy. He did not care about the battle and plunged into the cavern. His evil fetus, his future divine body, which he had nurtured for tens of thousands of years, turned into nothingness in a single day. Screech. The divine phoenix screeched. How could Muri let Shanghua have his way? Although she did not know what had happened in the evil cavern, the situation was extremely unfavorable for Shanghua. At this moment, Muri, who had transformed into a divine phoenix, flapped her wings. Endless divine phoenix fire fell down and blocked Shenghua's path. Her sharp phoenix claws clawed at him. No matter what, she could not let him enter the evil cavern. Oh my God, what happened? One of the disciples who stayed behind to guard the evil cavern was shocked. The dragon's roar just now shook the earth and the mountains. Uni Peak seemed to be on the verge of collapse. They were guarding the entrance of the cavern and almost fell in. Chapter 1541. At this moment, everyone stood at the entrance of the cave and looked into the evil cavern uneasily. The dragon's roar told them that something big must have happened inside. Could it be that Qin Hao had met with an accident and had been assimilated by the evil source? Qin Hao's ability was extraordinary and could be said to be the best of his generation. But after witnessing Shenghua's power, everyone was unsure. If he had been assimilated, the consequences would be very serious. Numerous gazes anxiously looked into the cave as a chill assaulted them. Even though they were standing in the outside world, the chilling coldness caused their souls to feel numb. What was even more terrifying was the evil qi that permeated the cave. Those who were closer to the cave only felt the evil qi invading their bodies and devouring their souls, wanting to replace their wills. They couldn't help but retreat, fearing that their souls would be trapped. This evil cavern was too terrifying. Just the entrance of the cave was so terrifying. It was hard to imagine that Qin Hao could survive the fall and come back alive. And even if he did, no one could say for sure how much of his true self he could retain. Perhaps the person who came back might not be the same Qin Hao from before. At this moment, Xiao Han, Xiaogua, and the others were extremely worried. Even Chun Wanqin, who had the ice spirit body, couldn't resist the chilling cold from the evil cavern. Could Qin Hao really survive? In fact, Qin Hao's fall was far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. The evil cavern's evil thoughts were very strong. The deeper they went, the stronger the chill. Ordinary people who fell and would be assimilated by the evil thoughts even if they didn't freeze to death. Moreover, there was the wind form of the wind of desolation inside. Who could resist the strangling power of the wind? But Qin Hao was an exception. He had the Red Lotus Overlord Fire, and his sovereign spirit was an unblemished sovereign spirit. His sovereign spirit was powerful, and he relied on the art of meditation to protect himself. He could resist the evil power to a certain extent, but he still couldn't hold on for too long. Qin Hao was gambling with his life. He was betting that he could withdraw the wind form in time and return safely. Shenghua probably did not expect that among the surviving disciples, there would be a flawless sovereign spirit reborn. Others couldn't even avoid it. Who would jump involuntarily? Furthermore, the person who jumped and possessed a flawless sovereign spirit and could control the wind element. Xianghua dared to leave the evil fetus in there because of Wind of Misfortune's protection. In his opinion, no one would dare to jump in and seek death. If there were such people, he would naturally stop them. However, how could he know that Qin Hao's cultivation was not at the same level as a sovereign spirit? He was a different kind of existence. Whoosh! A figure suddenly jumped out of the cave. The people who were guarding outside were startled by this figure. They could not help but feel nervous and alert. In front of them, Qin Hao's hair was disheveled, and his eyes were red. There was a terrible, evil light flashing in his eyes. A mass of bright red gas, like black blood clots, surrounded his body. His evil aura soared to the sky. His aura was the same as Shenghua's, and it brought great danger to everyone. Streaks of soul light flickered from the bodies of the various disciples. They were quiet and vigilant as they stared fixedly at Qin Hao. Once they discovered that something was amiss, they would make a move without mercy. At this moment, everyone, including Shou Wuk and Zhou Wudao, were extremely nervous. "I'm fine." A familiar voice came from Qin Hao's mouth. He shook his head and desperately suppressed the evil power in his body. He nodded at Shou Wuk. Phew! Everyone exhaled a mouthful of turbid air, and their tense minds relaxed. "What happened to you in there?" Ning Tianxing asked solemnly. Qin Hao could actually come back alive. Although his condition seemed unstable, and the evil aura in his body was overflowing, he should have been eroded by the evil power. However, at the same time, he gave off a faint sense of oppression. It seemed that he had made progress. He was not assimilated by the evil source, but his cultivation had increased. What exactly happened to him? "I don't have time to explain. Get out of the way." Qin Hao's voice was extremely cold. There was an obvious change in his temperament. This was caused by the evil power in his body. It was not a side that he deliberately showed. He had indeed been eroded by a huge amount of evil power. The power contained in the evil fetus was too strong. It was strong enough to devour his flawless emperor's soul. Just as he was about to lose his mind, the essence and blood of the gods and demons suppressed the evil fetus, giving him a chance to breathe and recover. Along the way, the power of the essence and blood was almost consumed by him. Although the evil fetus was suppressed, it could not suppress all of the evil power. Qin Hao still had a large part of the evil power in his body. Now, the slightest provocation could cause him to go berserk. While he could still keep his mind clear, his first task now was to break the barrier. As for the power of the wind, it had been completely integrated by the great void divine sword. After all, the wind element was the soul of the wind, and the wind shape was only the body. The body needed the soul to be in charge. Qin Hao ignored everyone and directly walked through the crowd. He raised his head and looked at the void enchantment. The sky was covered in blood-red light, like a bright red coffin lid, pressing down on everyone's heads, giving them a strong sense of oppression. If they broke it, they could escape the nightmare of the divine palace and return to the clean, secular world. "Open for me." Amidst the roar, a jade sword shadow appeared in Qin Hao's hand. On the blade, the red lotus overbearing fire burned fiercely. The strong flame will forced everyone to step back. The art of indestructible samsara was activated. Qin Hao held the divine implement and penetrated it with the tearing precepts. He pushed his palm toward the sky. Under his palm, violent sword chi raged. It wrapped around the great void divine sword and turned into a beam of sword aura. It was the 100 Steps flying sword. This sword was extremely fast. After it left his hand, endless sword chi tore through the space. Within the sword aura, a terrifying gale was suddenly born. The wind roared and shook heaven and earth. It was as if all the air in the world had been sucked out. It wrapped around the sword and turned into a huge wind dragon. It flew toward the evil force barrier. Bang! There was a thunder-like sound in the space. It was as if it had shocked the hearts of everyone. With a cry, all the geniuses present spat out a mouthful of blood at the same time. They looked over in shock. This sword was too powerful. It was as if it had pierced through the heavenly path. Ning Tianxing's eyes were fixed on it. He felt the power of the sword aura. He found that this power was comparable to the power when Sheng Hua destroyed the 12 ecliptic matrices. Even if he summoned the 9-life Phantom Fox, it was still annihilated in one blow. One sword, 9 lives. One sword could kill 9 souls of his Phantom Fox. How terrifying was that? It was unbelievable. Ning Tianxing's heart trembled violently. He looked at Qin Hao. He believed that this power was not produced by Qin Hao. There must be other factors involved. It was most likely related to the evil Denver. What did Qin Hao get in the evil den? A mere Renhuang could produce a destructive power that was close to nirvana. The others did not feel the same way as Prince Ning. They were more concerned about whether this sword could break the barrier and whether they could escape alive. Above the sky, endless sword aura raged. A terrible storm rolled in the sword aura as if it could destroy the heavens. However, the blood-colored barrier that shrouded the void was as stable as a mountain. It was still firmly suppressed there. This sword did not break it. How is this possible? Qin Hao said in disbelief. He had used all his strength, the Red Lotus Fire, the Dragon Soul, and the precepts of the divine level. There is also the complete wind of desolation in the sword. Even so, it still could not shake the evil soul barrier. Give me back my evil body. A ghostly scream was heard. Sheng Hua was surrounded by evil aura. He was approaching Qin Hao like a madman. That sword could not shake the barrier. In fact, that was not the case. Sheng Hua could sense that the evil soul barrier was beginning to become unstable. It was just that the sword was not strong enough to break it. If it was stronger, the barrier might not be able to stop it. But that was not the point. Qin Hao had swallowed Sheng Hua's evil fetus. The divine body that he had painstakingly refined for tens of thousands of years was taken away, cutting off his future path to godhood. The evil soul and the divine body were indispensable. Without them, he could not become a real god. A sharp scream was heard. Everyone looked over. They could not help but feel their scalps go numb. Sheng Hua was coming for them. His eyes were full of murderous intent. He was like a madman. From the beginning, Sheng Hua had not looked at them seriously. He had always treated them like toys. Why was he acting like a mad dog now? Give him back his evil body? Who took his evil body? Could it be? Everyone looked at Qin Hao. This Qin Hao was also full of evil aura. Everyone knew what had happened in the cave just now. Qin Hao had taken Sheng Hua's body of evil. Continue, don't stop. The divine phoenix let out a long cry. Muri transformed into a divine bird. Her flawless emperor will condensed into flames of the way. She kept smashing down madly to stop Sheng Hua. She was a true, flawless great emperor. Naturally, she could feel some changes. The barrier was no longer so stable. How dare a mere flawless great emperor stop a god? Sheng Hua stretched out his arms. Endless evil power surged and turned into evil spirits that flew toward the sky. They were densely packed like an army of evil spirits and the divine phoenix's flames of the way. The army of evil spirits continued to burn, but the evil power was endless. Under Sheng Hua's crazy attack, the divine phoenix was in danger of collapsing. Even if I die, I have no regrets for the divine palace. Muri's cry was earth-shattering. She was like a tigress fighting for her life. Her soul was constantly weakening, but she was still struggling to hold on. She was the remaining preacher of the divine palace. Dying in battle for the will of the divine palace was her destiny and the best ending. Second senior brother, lend me your power. Qin Hao let out a long howl. A luxurious emperor's silk wrapped around his body flew out and stood upright between heaven and earth, as if it had turned into a bowstring. Qin Hao raised his hand and called back the great void divine sword. He put on the imperial sash. His hands clasped tightly. His body desperately retreated and gradually pulled it apart. At this moment, Qin Hao felt as if Chong Yu's shadow was standing behind him, giving him silent encouragement and giving him the belief to break the enchantment. Dense dragon scales crawled all over his face. Qin Hao's body continued to grow. Blue veins like angry dragons appeared on the surface of his body and were about to pop out from his muscles. The primordial qi in his body surged. The burning rules merged into the red lotus tyrannical fire, and burned himself wildly. He did everything he could to strengthen his power. Blood continued to flow from his mouth. His face became crazier and crazier. It was as if he could not suppress the evil power in his body. He vomited blood and showed an expression of pleasure. This strange expression brought a great sense of distortion to everyone. However, everyone knew very well that everything was to break the enchantment. Even if Qin Hao was reduced to an evil source, he was still adhering to the last trace of faith in his heart. Tick! Xiaohan looked at Qin Hao's struggling appearance. It was as if the pain had spread to her body. But she knew that the torture he was enduring must be more intense than she had imagined. Buzz! There was a trembling, whistling sound. When Xiaohan's tears fell, the sword pierced through the sky and pierced the evil enchantment. Chapter 1542. Translator. Nioibo, Studio Editor. Nioibo, Studio Longevity. Tree. The second sword was unleashed, its power even more violent. Under the shock of the power, Uni Peak showed signs of collapsing. After experiencing the aftermath of countless battles, the Dao Peak was already damaged beyond repair. At this moment, it couldn't hold on any longer. The violent sword Qi whistled as it flew. Everyone raised their heads and saw dozens of blood-colored dragon shadows entwined around the long sword light. The dragon shadows crisscrossed and flew, letting out waves of furious dragon roars. It was extremely domineering. The indomitable sword light seemed to be able to tear apart everything. An even more violent storm hung at the tail. The storm swept the sword light forward together, providing an endless amount of power. Looking at it as a whole, the flying sword light and storm were like a giant arrow that pierced through the 9 heavens, capable of hitting the sun and moon. Puffed. A mouthful of blood sprayed on the ground. Qin Hao's dragonized state quickly weakened. His weakened body could no longer withstand the overload. He felt his knees on the spot, twisting in pain. Inside the body that had fused with the evil fetus, endless evil qi began to spread. In his soul and will, the voices of countless evil spirits sounded, as if they were persuading him to give up resisting and wanted to dominate him. Crash! At the same time, a cracking sound came from the top of the sky. It clearly entered everyone's eardrums. They heard it so clearly. No one cared about Qin Hao's current appearance. For most people, they were more concerned about whether or not they could leave this place alive. Everyone looked up to the sky and saw that above the blood-red barrier, dense spots had appeared. Around the spots, a large number of cracks had appeared, and those cracks continued to spread outwards. Even though the barrier had not completely shattered, it was showing signs of collapsing. It was effective. The second sword had weakened the evil power and almost pierced through it. Big brother, boss, Yi Shuihan, Xiaogua, and the others surrounded Qin Hao. Xiaohan hugged him painfully. The bloodline crown appeared, and a ball of divine light flowed through their bodies. At the side, Su Jin's flute spirit was placed horizontally under his lips. He played a quiet tune. It was the Yaoguang Peak's Emperor's meditation mantra. He used the flute music to enter Qin Hao's consciousness to suppress the rampaging evil power. They could all see that sword had used up almost all of Qin Hao's strength. At this moment, black evil marks appeared on his face. The evil power in his body soared, and he was unable to suppress it. The slightest mistake could cause him to lose himself. The situation was extremely dangerous. If there's another sword strike, the enchantment will definitely break, someone said in pleasant surprise, seeing the hope of escaping. As long as Qin Hao gave it a shot, they would be able to escape and return to the family they longed for day and night. Everyone turned to look at Qin Hao, their eyes flickering with strong anticipation. However, Qin Hao's condition was not good. It was obvious that he was unable to withstand the third sword strike. I know he's in pain now, but no one can control the power of the wind on the sword except him. This Emperor's silk is Chang Yu's relic. It has already recognized him as its master. I don't think anyone can control it. Ning Tianqing looked down at Xiaohan. The implication was that Qin Hao had to use the third sword. This was related to everyone's survival. He has no strength left, Xiao Han said angrily. The only one we can rely on now is him. Ning Tianqing's tone was very determined. Even someone as proud as him had to admit this. What about you? Shouwuk looked at Ning Tianqing. What are you? Number 1 in the Divine Palace. Not satisfied? Sweeping a peak. Where was the courage? I don't want to have an unnecessary dispute with you. If the evil body was in me, I wouldn't need Qin Hao. Ning Tianqing said. He thought that the terrible wind on the sword must be driven by the evil body. Since Qin Hao had refined Sheng Hua's evil body, he certainly had the ability to destroy the enchantment. If the evil body was in you, you might not be alive. Let me handle the third sword. Shouwuk stepped out and looked back at Miori, who was fighting with Sheng Hua. On the huge body of the divine phoenix, the flames of the way were weak. Many of the feathers were falling, revealing black wounds caused by the evil body. Miori could not hold on for long. She might be defeated in the next moment. On the other hand, Sheng Hua's attacks were getting fiercer and fiercer. He was almost hysterical. Even though Shouwuk did not have the confidence to drive the Emperor's silk and the Great Void Sword, he had no other choice. He could not sit and watch Qin Hao die. If he allowed Qin Hao to continue exhausting himself, he might really die. Wuk, Qin Hao said weakly. He got up slowly and said, I'll help you. He was not looking down on his opponent. If he did not have the art of endless samsara, he could not drive the Great Void Sword. The two were one. Okay. Shouwuk nodded. But you can't even take care of yourself now. Xiao Han pulled Qin Hao's sleeves tightly. She would not let him use even a little bit of his vital qi. Sacrificing one person for the sake of all, for longevity, or for the sake of the common people. Qin Hao said that he was not the kind of person who was willing to give up his own life for the sake of the world. What he wanted was simple. He wanted true love to hold his hand, brothers to support him, and loved ones to accompany him. That was enough, and Xiao Han would not allow him to do that. If she lost him, what was the point of living alone? Her stubborn face represented Xiao Han's determination. How could Qin Hao not understand that? But just as Ning Tianqing said, the only person who could break the enchantment was Qin Hao. If you don't act now, it will be too late. Ning Tianqing urged. At this time, Miori was retreating. The divine phoenix body was already being beaten by Sheng Hua. Success or failure, life or death, it was all in an instant. I'm full. I'm hungry. I'm full. Suddenly, a childlike voice rang out from Qin Hao's body. Everyone saw a beam of dark green light fly out from the storage ring on his finger and land on the ground. It transformed into a withered grass sprout, which was extremely unhealthy. Divine grass? Someone exclaimed. It was the divine grass that swallowed medicine souls in the altar of fallen Emperor Bei's test. I'm full, Dad, I'm hungry. The withered grass sprout jumped under Qin Hao's feet and touched his knee again and again. It was like a spoiled child begging to be in the arms of an adult. It was lively and cute, but at this time, no one had the time to care about the life and death of a grass. Even Qin Hao smiled helplessly before he stepped into the divine palace, because this divine grass was obsessed with the soul power of the tranquil nether water. It was completely attached to him. So Xiao Han let him bring it along. And Qin Hao also felt that this grass was a little unusual. Wait, a light flashed in his mind. Qin Hao caught the key. It was not a grass, but a longevity tree. He had seen the powerful soul of Master Tai Wei with his own eyes. That heavenly tree, full of life, and the appearance of the divine grass in front of him were carved from the same mold. It was a living longevity tree. Perhaps it was the only one left in the world. As long as there was enough soul power, it could grow indefinitely. It would not be a problem to break through the sky. Maybe they could rely on it to break the barrier. Tan Geng, Northgate Xuanda, release your soul power and instill it with your soul power, Qin Hao shouted. Tan Geng and Northgate Xuanda were stunned. What are you waiting for? I don't have the strength to use the third sword. Whether I live or die depends on you. Not only you, all the junior brothers of Tai Wei Peak. Please do not hold back and instill your soul power into it. It is a longevity tree cultivated by the divine palace, Qin Hao shouted. Boom! His words stirred up 1,000 waves. It was as if he had poked open everyone's heads. They remembered that when Zhou Wu Dao was attacked by the divine flower, Master Taiwei's obsession had revealed his soul power. The aura of that soul power was exactly the same as this grass sprout. Quick! Northgate Schwander roared, soul light raging around him. It was obvious that they could not rely on Qin Hao. In the end, they had to rely on themselves. With enough soul power to water the longevity tree, it could grow endlessly big, enough to break the barrier. However, back in Fall Emperor Bay, there had been so many people testing their soul power attributes that only a pitifully small number of people could make the longevity tree grow more than 10 meters tall. Now, there were only slightly more than 40 disciples of Taiwei Peak, and most of them could not make the longevity tree grow more than 10 meters tall. Forget it. Let it eat. Back then, everyone's cultivation was still shallow. Most of them were early-stage Yuan venerates. Now, after 3 years of tempering in the Divine Palace, the teachings they had received were real. Their cultivation levels could not be compared to the past. Everyone had ascended to the Emperor realm, and many of them had evolved nomological laws and touched the threshold of the Emperor realm. For example, Tan Gung and Northgate Schwanda were both 9th-level human sovereigns. The figures turned into a human wall surrounding the longevity tree in the middle. Every figure was from the Taiwei Peak. They were born with medicine souls and were destined to be great masters of alchemy in the future. Soul lights flickered one after another. The souls of the cauldron, the medicine staff, the medicine pot, and all kinds of alchemy equipment, even those with plant-type souls, all released their soul power. Bright lights flashed as they desperately poured their soul power into the longevity tree. The disciples of the other peaks could not wait to give birth to a medicine soul. Whoosh! Endless medicinal power seeped into the longevity tree and nourished its vitality. In the blink of an eye, the longevity tree grew wildly in front of everyone's eyes. Its momentum was like a prairie fire as it climbed higher and higher. In an instant, it had turned into a towering tree. Its thick branches were like countless palms that supported the boundary. During the assessment at Fallen Emperor Bay, very few people had been able to make the longevity tree grow more than 10 meters. However, these 3 years of cultivation had not been in vain. Almost everyone had crossed 1 or 2 cycles and reached the upper-level human sovereign level. Under the combined efforts of everyone, the power of their medicine souls was extremely fierce. What are you waiting for? Qin Hao grabbed Xiao Han's hand and leaped up, stepping on the trunk of the longevity tree as they advanced. It was as if they were climbing a building. The others did the same. They were unwilling to fall behind and flew to the top of the tree. Then, pairs of hands clung to the branches tightly. They were grasping at straws. Tan Gung, Northgate Schwanda, and the other disciples of Taiwei Peak were releasing their soul power while riding on the tree crown with everyone else. They were all red in the face and neck. Their strength had been greatly depleted. This longevity tree was too good at eating. Not yet. Those who have pills, contribute them, Showuk said as he took out the pills he had brought from the sword sect and handed them to Tan Gung. Tan Gung flicked open the bottle and poured it into his mouth, swallowing a whole. It was a race against time now. Who knew if Shenhua would come the next moment? Many people also crushed the pills they had brought from their families into powder and poured it directly on the leaves of the longevity tree. The powder was absorbed at a speed visible to the naked eye. Then, endless branches spread and covered the entire Uni Peak, turning it into a lush green sea. Boom! The longevity tree soared into the sky and completely blocked the boundary. At this moment, the void shook violently. Chapter 1543. Countless branches crawled along the bottom of the barrier and leaned on it. Countless branches intertwined and swept out, densely packed and crisscrossing like creepers that covered the entire wall. They actually covered the entire huge barrier that enveloped the entire void. It was as if countless palms were lifting it up. That endless power caused extremely strong vibrations to be born between heaven and earth. In the distant void, Xianghua and Muri were engaged in a fierce battle. Naturally, when they saw the scene of the divine tree supporting the sky, they couldn't help but attack more fiercely and become even more frenzied. The enchantment of evil power was a nirvana-level existence, formed by gathering the power of all evil spirits. In fact, it was stronger than ordinary nirvana-level matrices. However, Qin Hao swallowed the evil fetus, causing the peak to lose its source of evil power. The enchantment was damaged and could no longer repair itself. Every loss would weaken it. Xianghua didn't know how Qin Hao controlled the power of the wind of misfortune. When he captured the wind of misfortune and imprisoned it in the evil lair, it took a lot of effort. It was hard to imagine that a little Ren Huang could control the wind of desolation and use its power to crack the enchantment. The longevity tree was indeed the only one left in the world, but it was not very useful to Xianghua, so he had never paid attention to it. However, this was not enough to prove that the longevity tree was weak. On the contrary, it was extremely powerful. It was because the longevity tree contained the power of life, which clashed with Shenghua's evil power. He couldn't use it, so he threw it out of the divine palace and left it in the gulf of the fallen emperor as a test tool to test the strength of a warrior's bloodline. The longevity tree was originally a sacred object of the divine palace's Taiwei Peak. It could only thrive under the nourishment of the abundant spiritual energy of the divine palace. The spiritual energy of the outside world was thin and it lacked nutrition, so it had always been in a primitive state. In other words, if it was given enough nourishment, it could grow without restraint. It was completely possible to break the enchantment, not to mention that the enchantment had been cracked by Qin Hao with the power of the wind of misfortune. One could imagine how angry Shenghua was at this moment. The evil fetus that he had refined for 10,000 years had been taken away, and Qin Hao had cut off his path to godhood. Now, he even wanted to escape. Boundless evil power erupted. Regardless of whether or not the body of the emperor could withstand it, the evil soul rippled with terrifying power of the will of the great path. One after another, deformed and ugly heads broke out from the body of the holy flower, letting out sharp and hoarse screams. They blotted out the sky and the sun, and there was no end to them. All of them madly rushed toward the figure of the disciple on the longevity tree to devour him. Seeing this, Muri let out a long cry of the divine phoenix. Unblemished flames of the way spread out from the body of the divine phoenix, forming a raging barrier of flames to block it. However, the power of Shenghua's evil soul was too strong. Even though many of the evil spirits were killed by the flames of Tao, there were still many deformed heads that flew towards Qin Hao and the others. Almost there, almost there. You guys have to work harder, Zhou Wudao urged with all his might. The incomparably huge divine tree stood at the peak of the Wei Peak. Countless raging dragon-like roots penetrated the ground and ran through the entire Wei Peak. The vast evil cavern was filled by the roots of the longevity tree. It was like an imposing giant, supporting the enchantment of evil power. Between heaven and earth, there was an invisible force trembling wildly. But everyone felt that something was missing. Although the divine tree was close to the enchantment, it did not have the strength to penetrate it. Oh no, Shenghua is driving the evil spirits to kill us. A disciple looked over with a pale face. At this time, in mid-air, one after another, long and ugly heads were shuttling back and forth, crossing the line of defense of the flames of the way of the divine phoenix, and biting towards the crown of the tree. The obsessions of the 7 palace lords of Migres were swallowed up by these ugly things. At this moment, all of them were riding on the crown of the tree, and their hearts were filled with endless fear. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. Green branches swept through the air, turning into the sharpest spikes in the world. Sensing the danger Qin Hao and the others were facing, The endless branches rushed forward and pierced through the bald heads of all the monsters, not allowing any of the evil spirits to pass through. Everyone was shocked. This tree was a bit powerful. The Nirvana-level obsessions could not resist the evil spirits, and they were easily wiped out by it. It had to be said that Qin Hao seemed to have picked up a treasure. Power! Give me power! The childish voice resounded in the world, and it sounded very anxious. Then, everyone saw that the branches of the longevity tree that pierced through the heads of the evil spirits quickly withered and turned into ashes. Although it had killed countless evil spirits, half of its branches had withered. Life and death were two extremes, and their powers clashed and countered each other. Although the evil spirits could devour the will of life of living people, they could not refine the longevity tree. Similarly, the longevity tree contained the purest life force in the world, and if it was hit too fiercely by the will of destruction, it would not be able to withstand it. Whoosh! The divine tree shook, and with just one hit, its giant body began to shrink. Obviously, the soul power of the people could not support its consumption. Damn it! Sheng Hua's roar shook the world. If he had known this would happen, he would have thrown that rotten thing cultivated by Tai Wei into the inner sea of the southern region to feed the fish. The tree is shrinking. What should we do? Senior brothers of Tai Wei Peak, hang in there. We have no more energy. Sorry. Beams of soul power disappeared one after another. Many disciples of Tai Wei Peak were pale and covered in sweat. They were so tired that they could not squeeze out any more soul power. Currently, only Tangung and Northgate Xuanda had the energy to grit their teeth and hang in there. Unfortunately, no matter how hard they tried, they could not even stop the longevity tree from shrinking, let alone stabilize its size. Splat! Qin Hao cut his palm and pressed it on the trunk of the divine tree. Since he had used up all his energy, he could only use his blood to replace it. After all, his blood contained the power of the nether-purifying water. His blood was absorbed by the divine tree, and its shrinking size stopped almost immediately. It began to grow again, and the branches that had been infected by the evil spirits gradually regained their vitality. If you don't want to die, do as I say. Showuk's eyes were slightly red, and there was an extremely sharp sword aura around him. It was as if he could shoot out sword wool from his eyes and kill people without leaving a trace. The disciples of Tai Wei Peak who were riding on the tree nodded repeatedly. They all understood and followed suit. Beams of sharp blade light pierced their palms and pressed them on the trunk below them. When the blood was absorbed by the longevity tree, it grew rapidly. A huge ball of green light burst out from where Qin Hao was and extended to the entire divine tree. In an instant, the roots that reached into the ground became stronger, and there was a loud, cracking sound. Under the huge rocks of the Wei Peak, tree roots kept bursting out. It was not only the Wei Peak that was cracking, but the enchantment above was also cracking. It was about to break. We're almost out. Put in more effort. Even if my blood runs dry, I don't want to stay in this broken place anymore. The disciples' eyes were wide open as they screamed with all their might. Their screams were as loud as pigs being slaughtered, joining together into one sound. Boom! The tree crown supported the enchantment with evil power shook. Boom! The second sound. Boom! The third sound. It was as if a huge hammer was striking. There was a cracking sound. A sharp branch pierced out, and then countless branches frequently pierced the enchantment. The cracks continued to expand, like a broken mirror. There was a loud crash, and the evil light above everyone's head completely collapsed. Between heaven and earth, countless fresh spiritual energy began to flow in. The power that was pressing on everyone's hearts completely disappeared. Run. They didn't think too much about it, and they didn't even have time to cheer. There was only one word in everyone's mind. Run. Run as far as you can. They would never tell anyone that they were disciples of the Divine Palace. This title was a curse. Give me back the evil body. The hoarse roar shook the heavens as if it had caused countless evil spirits to howl. The disciples were liberated, but Shenghua had fallen into complete madness. The enchantment was broken. If Qin Hao escaped, it would not be so easy to take back the evil body. Boom! A great evil shadow was born behind Shenghua. It was huge, with a green face and fangs, 3 heads, and 6 arms. It was extremely ferocious. It was like an evil god of calamity had descended. The terrible evil shadow stepped on the heavens. Its huge palm ignored the divine phoenix flames and knocked Miori down from the sky. It waved the other 5 arms toward the longevity tree. At this moment, it was as if countless evil spirits were born between heaven and earth. The entire void was imprisoned. The disciples who escaped were shocked to find that their bodies could not move. The rules of nirvana, the heavens were still. Dad, run. The childish voice of a child came into Qin Hao's mind, stimulating his soul. The huge longevity tree shook violently, and the crown of the tree shook. It broke Shenghua's evil power of nirvana. Everyone felt a shock coming from under their feet. It was as if the soles of their feet had been punched. One by one, they were involuntarily shaken into the sky and disappeared in the sky. Boom! The giant arm formed by the massive evil force swept out. The evil god's 5 armed shadows swept out from different directions and slammed into the trunk of the divine tree. The thick trunk was actually broken by the attack, and a loud cracking sound was heard. Under the erosion of Shenghua's evil power, the broken longevity tree shrank and withered. It turned into powder and disappeared. Hungry, I'm so hungry. The childish voice finally stopped ringing. Longevity tree. Qin Hao stretched out a hand full of cracks. It would not give up its life for the world, but it was willing to give up its longevity for him. Xiao Han hugged Qin Hao tightly and looked at the longevity tree that turned into ashes. It was all over. Never come back again. Their vision became more and more blurry. Faintly, they seemed to hear Sister Muri's words. Bang! Muri's body fell to the ground. Her soul power was exhausted, and her divine phoenix body no longer existed. Her Migres palace clothes were tattered, and blood flowed in many places. Shenghua looked up at the void. The evil light in his eyes was strong, full of anger, unwillingness, and resentment. But he was not in time to stop Qin Hao, who had taken the evil fetus, successfully escaped. Although he escaped, you will pay 100 times the price. Boom! The mighty, evil shadow's foot fell, and the void trembled. It stomped down on Miori, who had lost her divine phoenix body. Miori smiled as if she did not notice. Faces appeared in her mind. Eastern Sky, Changyu, Migres, her uncle masters, Shirmu, Izue, Tianke, Zhanxiong, and the other peak seats. She was supposed to be a dead person. It was a blessing from the heavens that she had lived for so long. It was no longer important how Shenghua tortured her, whether to devour her divine phoenix body or refine her emperor's will. She had no regrets in buying time for Qin Hao to leave. The giant evil shadow's foot fell, and the heavens seemed to collapse. Qin Hao had escaped. Only Miori could bear the hatred of having her body taken. But at this moment, a beam of light suddenly returned from the outside world. It was like a bolt of lightning that pierced through the void. It broke into the broken world of the divine palace. When the evil shadow's foot fell, the light swept up Miori on the ground. Bang! The evil shadow's foot fell, and the earth shook violently. Yin Yi Dao peak exploded under this destructive power. The other 6 peaks also began to collapse, and clouds of dust rose into the sky. Who is it? Shenghua's heart was filled with shock. The person who will kill you. In the void, a figure in a purple robe stood. On his face, there was a Chila mask. Although his back was facing Miori, this person's body flashed with extremely bright golden emperor's light. His powerful aura was no weaker than Miori's. He was like a god of war flying from the 9th heaven. Leave. A male voice came into Miori's ears. She had never heard of this tone before. Obviously, she did not know who it was. Thank you, Miori said. The remaining dilly turned his body and turned into a flash of golden brilliance that flew out of the ninth heaven. In order to stop Shenghua, she fought with her life, but it did not mean that she wanted to die in his hands. Qin Hao was the only flame left in the Migres palace. He shouldered her hope, and she also wanted to see him grow up with her own eyes. Without any superfluous words, Miuri left directly. This person's cultivation was not below hers. Since he dared to break in and face the evil soul Shenghua, it proved that he had the ability to deal with it. As for gratitude, it will be done sooner or later. The huge heretic god's Dharma body stood in midair. Shenghua was inside the Dharma body. He watched Miaoli leave, but he didn't make a move to stop her. Instead, he focused all his attention on the Qilin man who had barged in. Shenghua felt a sense of danger from the other party. Okay, next, I can completely let go of my hands and feet and fight, the man in Qilin said. He looked up at the void. Qin Hao had safely left, and he was no longer afraid of exposing his identity. Chapter 1544. In the void, the two of them faced each other quietly, and the air was filled with a strong, murderous aura. The noble purple robe rustled, exuding a graceful and noble aura. Under the Kylan mask, a pair of resolute eyes gave off a feeling of iron-bloodedness. If Qin Hao was here, he would definitely recognize that this person was Dan Ge. Of course, he had another identity. He was one of the lords of the Thunderpool Palace, the Thunder Emperor of the East Continent, and also the master of Lei Jiao. At this moment, there was a faint sound of thunder vibrating within the body of the Imperial Censor, and the golden-white Emperor's light that was blooming became more and more violent. His aura was rising steadily, as if there was no limit. He had suppressed his cultivation for many years. He endured in Dan Ge, and even after he came to the southern region, he still endured. During the battle in Golden Light City, he could have easily killed Xianyuan Wuba and the others, but he was afraid that it would arouse Qin Hao's suspicion, so he tried his best to restrain himself. Otherwise, how could Xianyuan Wuyao, the third prince of the Xianyuan family, be worthy of being his opponent? The Imperial Censor felt that it was a shame to fight with Xianyuan Wuyao, as the other party was not worthy at all. Later, after the battle in Feng City ended, he boarded the ship with Duan Zhanfei and prepared to return to Beijiang together. Halfway through, he changed his mind and decided to stay and watch over Qin Hao, and Duan Zhanfei had no objection to it. In fact, for the past 3 years, the Imperial Censor had been hiding in the dark. On the day the signs were activated, he also came to the Imperial Gulf and witnessed Shenghua, disguised as the black-robed Emperor Yuan, slaughtering all the signs. At that time, he could see that there was a big conspiracy behind the Divine Palace. It was just that Qin Hao and the others were teleported away by the array. The array force was extremely strange and had the effect of hallucinating. Affected by the array force, the Imperial Censor couldn't keep up in time. Until one day, he suddenly realized that the Divine Palace was in front of him. You set up the Nirvana barrier, refine the talents of the 4 regions of the continent, and seize the bloodline of all things. I originally thought that I was cold-blooded enough, but you are even crazier than me. The Imperial Censor said coldly. The barrier of the Divine Palace was very strong, and even he wasn't confident that he could break it from the outside. Moreover, he had been hesitating to bombard the boundary. He didn't know if it would affect Qin Hao and the Divine Palace. He didn't dare to act rashly. But today, the enchantment had been broken from the inside out. At that moment, the monster trainer's reaction was not one of surprise. Instead, he immediately went into battle mode and prepared for battle. Now that Qin Hao had safely left, he had nothing to worry about. Who are you? Shenghua's scolding came from the giant evil god Shadow. He could clearly sense the other's level. It was at the peak of the unblemished plane, infinitely close to the Nirvana plane. This man was not a member of the Divine Palace, yet he possessed such terrifying power. Even if you ask 100 more questions, the answer will still be the same. You. The Imperial Censor raised his hand slowly and pointed at the gigantic evil god Shadow. "You must die today." This person's evil aura was too dense. It was unknown how many experts' Tao wills he had devoured, so he posed a great threat to Qin Hao. "That depends on whether you have the ability to kill me," Sheng Hua roared. The shadow of the evil god stepped forward. As its foot landed, the space trembled violently, as if it was about to collapse. A huge fist blasted forward, spewing out endless evil light, swallowing the Imperial censer whole. Boom! Crack! A bolt of thunder fell from the ninth heaven, landing where the Imperial censer was. The evil light disappeared under the bombardment of the thunder. An equally huge shadow descended from the sky, like the god of thunder, surrounded by lightning, exuding the might of the great path of thunder. "Is that all you've got?" The Imperial censer sneered and punched forward. The huge shadow of the god of thunder stepped forward, and the might of the great path turned into endless lightning of doomsday. Bursts of explosive power bombarded the evil god's body. Boom, boom, boom. The evil god Shadow took a few steps back. Sheng Hua felt his body go numb. The terrible will of the great path of thunder penetrated his evil power and invaded his body, as if it could shatter his evil soul. "Thunder arts, can you compare to the Taoist scripture?" Sheng Hua clenched his fist in the void. Above his head, a huge thundercloud descended. Dazzling divine thunder fell madly from the thundercloud and gathered on his body. His 6 evil arms waved and swept out an endless sea of thunder to devour the Imperial censer. Why no is far more than just thunder arts. The Imperial censer roared, and a turbulent brilliance burst out in all directions. A terrifying fighting will filled the sky. The fighting will was so strong that it was as if a real god had possessed him. The thunder above the god of thunder's chi flashed, and a blazing divine thunder intertwined with Sheng Hua's evil thunder, and they attacked each other crazily. Boom! The great path was shattered, and the divine thunder was destroyed. The evil thunder continued to move forward, fierce and overbearing. Along the way, it condensed into thunder swords. Endless divine thunder swords pierced through the evil god's shadow. A mouthful of blood spilled in the air, and the battle form that enveloped Sheng Hua was shattered. A look of shock appeared in his eyes. Extreme fighting will. It was pure fighting will, without any rules or will. It was the most fundamental battle. It was as if this Qilin man was the incarnation of the god of war, born to fight. When the fighting will entered his body, it was not only his thunder arts that were strengthened, but also his constitution. The fighting will was inextinguishable, and his combat ability was endless. "You're not weak either, but a little weaker than me." A trace of blood flowed from the corner of the Imperial censor's mouth. Below his Qilin mask, a small amount of evil chi slowly seeped out. It was obvious that he had been injured by Sheng Hua's evil thunder, but the evil chi was immediately destroyed by the divine thunder around him. "One more move, and I'll grant you hatred," the Imperial censor said. Platinum vigor chi raged. The sky above the divine palace was once again covered by huge dark clouds. Dazzling divine thunder flashed, and the powerful might of the way continued to strengthen in the fighting will. 9 palaces versus Dilly. Sheng Hua clenched his fist and roared. The evil god's shadow collapsed, and it was obvious that he was at a disadvantage. But it was impossible to say that he had lost. Beams of golden light continued to penetrate his body, wrists, legs, knees, back, and heart. When the last beam of golden light reached his head, it flashed. Sheng Hua had actually opened up the complete power of the War Emperor. His flesh contained endless, overbearing power. He clenched his fist, and a series of sonic booms were heard in the void. Countless abnormally long heads poked out from Sheng Hua's back, waving like countless arms. In those heads, the faces of Migrez Supreme and Mizar Zhan Zun appeared, filled with endless evil thoughts. Sheng Hua awakened all evil and released the complete evil force. That powerful force began to crack the Thearch's body little by little. Emperor Yuan's body was obviously not enough to withstand his explosive power. If it were the evil fetus, he would definitely be stronger. Tomb of the Gods. The Imperial Censor spat out a word. It was as if a divine order had descended. He pointed forward, and divine thunder struck down. With a buzz, the sky seemed to collapse. The huge, dark clouds containing endless thunder tribulations pressed toward Shenhua. Even if the evil god under the heavenly Tao was still alive, it would be difficult for him to escape death. Shenhua looked up at the sky. The dark clouds were huge and boundless. Terrifying thunder tribulations flickered within them. A terrifying battle might press down. It was as if the war god of the Nine Lands was standing in the thunderclouds. At this moment, countless evil spirits behind Shenhua frantically rose into the sky, trying to stop it with evil power. Bang! 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 Ugly heads continued to explode in the thunder tribulations, including the faces of Migrez and the others. The thunderclouds of the war god fell with unstoppable momentum, pressing down on Shenghua's head inch by inch. At this moment, Shenhua felt as if he was fighting against the heavenly Tao. He actually felt powerless. He raised his arms, and the battle of the Nine Palaces dilly in his body erupted to the limit. His constantly changing face finally fixed on the appearance of Mizar Zhanzun, as if he wanted to use Mizar's will to support himself. Even so, his legs still sank bit by bit, his back gradually bent, and his bones burst one after another. No! Boom! Crack! The thunder tribulations of the Tomb of the Gods engulfed the earth, completely covering the broken divine palace. An extremely unwilling roar dissipated in the thunder tribulation. I already said that you were a little weaker than me. The Imperial Censor witnessed Shenghua's fall. He could no longer feel any trace of evil power in the endless space. A smile appeared under his Kyla mask. Then his body trembled violently, and the shadow of the thunder god in the void suddenly dissipated. A mouthful of blood sprayed on the ground, and he coughed violently. It seems that this body is still unable to support my strength. He gently rolled up his sleeves, and many cracks appeared on his sturdy arms. Some evil chi was seeping out of his skin. The Imperial Censor's expression was solemn. He turned into a stream of light and flew toward the sky. He had to quickly find a place to expel the evil power that was eroding his body. He flapped his primordial wings and flew tirelessly. Time seemed to pass very slowly in his consciousness. After an unknown period of time, just when the disciples were about to faint from exhaustion, their eyes finally lit up. It was as if they had entered another world and finally returned to reality. Pung, 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 pung. Many wet bodies fell to the ground. Every time they fell, they lay motionless in their original position. It was as if even their heartbeats had stopped. The sound of panting could be heard. At a glance, on the shore of a vast bay, the disciples who had escaped from the divine palace were sprawled haphazardly in the grass like a group of dead pigs. Qinhao's head was resting on Xiaohan's lap. A layer of clear light flickered on his body as he gradually recovered some strength. However, he was not relaxed at the moment. In order to help them escape, the entire longevity tree had been destroyed by Shenhua. Senior Sister Muri had brought up the rear, and her fate was still unknown. How could he calm down? We finally escaped. Zhou Wudao's sobbing voice was heard. 3 years in the Divine Palace had been both a dream and a nightmare. In the past 3 years, everyone's cultivation had undergone earth-shaking changes. They had all advanced from the Yuan Venerate level to the human sovereign level. Many of them had comprehended laws, and a few had even stepped into the Emperor level. If they had been in the outside world, they might not have had such impressive achievements in 30 years, let alone 3 years. However, all of this had been a gamble with their lives. They had almost died in the hands of the evil soul, been refined into Tao intent, and lost their consciousness. Even though everyone present was a famous genius, they were still filled with fear of the divine palace. If they could do it all over again, probably no one would be willing to participate in this omen. The divine palace would become an indelible shadow in everyone's hearts, and Shanghua would definitely become a nightmare that they could not get rid of. Perhaps many people would wake up from their dreams in fright. However, in the past 3 years, they had been taught by the 7 peak venerates and taken care of by the various chief senior brothers. Even though those people were just a wisp of obsession, they were so real. Perhaps Shanghua would become a fear in the depths of their hearts, but the peak venerates and senior brothers were beautiful memories that were engraved in their memories. This is Fallen Emperor Bei. Showuk propped himself up and scanned the surroundings. He couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. The place where they were now was actually the last assessment site where they had received the omen. They had returned to square one. Hearing this, everyone crawled up and looked around. It really was the fallen Emperor Bei. Chapter 1545. Translator. Henyi Translations Editor. Henyi Translations. The Ocean Emperor welcomes the Emperor at the source of the southern region's inner sea, fallen Emperor Bei. Now the river water flowed slowly like blood. Some broken bones floated with the waves. Occasionally, a few horrifying skulls would emerge from the water, causing one's heartstrings to tighten. The scene was no longer as peaceful and natural as it was when they first came here. Blood and evil aura were everywhere, giving them the illusion that they were still in the divine palace. A pungent smell wafted over. Everyone looked at themselves and then looked at the others. At this moment, they discovered that everyone's clothes were soaked by the river water. It was as if blood was flowing down. They couldn't help but bend over and vomit. Could it be that we returned to the outside world through the blood river? No wonder I had the illusion of drowning during the escape. Everyone recalled. They flew from the divine palace to the top of the void. Although they were extremely nervous along the way and were in a mess, everyone's senses were still there. Could it be that the divine palace is under the blood river? Or fallen Emperor Bei was originally the divine palace back then? Showuk looked at everyone with a frown. What he said was not without reason. The source of the inner sea was most likely the old site of the divine palace. It was only because Shanghua destroyed it that it turned into a deep pit. Later, it was filled by the river water and disappeared in history. And under the riverbed was the old site of the divine palace. It was just that an evil force opened up a boundless space, just like the hidden dragon mystic realm. Yi Yao, Zhang Qingqi, and many other geniuses of the southern region sighed in their hearts. It turned out that the divine palace had always been on the other side of the inner sea. This was something that many martial artists of the southern region had never thought of. And now, the divine palace was destroyed. The sacred ground of a generation of orthodoxy had also become a forbidden land that everyone revered. No one dared to set foot in it anymore. Big brother, we have to leave quickly. Xiaoguo walked to Qin Hao's side and said. Qin Hao's gaze followed the river bend and looked at the vast and endless inner sea. Crossing the inner sea is not an easy task. The geology of this inner sea was special. Countless terrifying storms swept across the sky, and the wind was extremely strong. Even the lower-level thearchs would find it difficult to resist. Ordinary martial artists couldn't tear space to move forward, let alone fly. Moreover, they had just experienced a catastrophe. In order to escape, they had exhausted their essence, chi, and soul. They didn't have the strength to move in the sky. How could they swim without a sturdy ship? That was no different from courting death. Recalling the man-eating sea beasts in the inland sea, everyone's expression changed. The ferocity of the sea demons was no less than that of Shanghua. Roar! All of a sudden, an extremely terrifying roar of a sea beast came from the front. The roar was so strong that it could shake one's mind. Everyone saw layers of giant waves that were hundreds of meters high coming from the direction of the inner sea. Behind the giant waves was a huge and terrifying beast shadow. The beast shadow was so powerful that it could overturn rivers and seas. Its aura was so strong that it was shocking. Ocean Emperor. Ning Tianqing's expression changed. His body trembled as he subconsciously took half a step back. The aura that was constantly approaching was an emperor level. The beast shadow that was pushing the giant wave was undoubtedly an Emperor-level sea demon. At this moment, everyone's faces turned completely pale. Having personally experienced the catastrophe of the Divine Palace, the power of Shenghua had left an indelible shadow in their hearts. In order to break the boundary and escape, everyone was now seriously injured. Their soul power and vitality were exhausted, and they were extremely exhausted physically and mentally. How could they have any strength left to fight against the sea monsters? What's more, it was a head sea emperor. The heavens want us dead, someone cried out sorrowfully. They were not even given half a chance to live. Qin Hao stared ahead, watching the rolling giant waves approach. He felt that the aura of the Ocean Emperor behind the giant waves was somewhat familiar. At this moment, a figure flashed in his mind, and his expression relaxed. That's right, it was Jiao, the nine-headed sea snake. Now, it had also released its cultivation and returned to the Emperor realm. Don't be nervous, it's an acquaintance, Qin Hao said softly to Shou Wuk, stopping him. An acquaintance? At this moment, Shou Wuk was gathering his sword momentum, wanting to perish together with the enemy. Qin Hao smiled and did not explain anything. Welcome, master. Whoosh. The giant waves that were crazily surging forward suddenly stopped. Under the control of a tyrannical force, they automatically overflowed and turned into water vapor that filled the sky. Then a giant monster with 9 snake heads and pitch-black scales all over its body stood in front of everyone. Its body was coiled up, and it was incomparably majestic. It was like a peak of the Divine Palace, and it was extremely shocking. But to the surprise of the disciples, the powerful Ocean Emperor actually spoke in human language. It coiled down respectfully, and its 9 proud snake heads lowered to a certain position at the same time, as if it was worshipping. Welcome, master. Who was the Ocean Emperor's master? Everyone looked over and realized that the person who the Ocean Emperor had submitted to was Qin Hao. You're very punctual. Did you release your cultivation as soon as you sensed my appearance? Qin Hao smiled and walked forward to Jiao. Jiao still had all its heads lowered, and its 9 huge heads were almost stuck to the ground. It said, I planted the mark of master and servant. When master appeared, Jiao came forward to greet master. But I released my cultivation half a month ago because I really couldn't suppress it. Jiao said gloomily. Because its demonic power was too strong, it was extremely uncomfortable to hold it in its body. If it did not release it soon, it might face great trouble. It had no choice but to release it. On the day it released the seal, it was also extremely worried. After all, the fact that there was no Imperial realm in the internal sea had become a curse on all sea demons. But anyone who broke through to the Imperial realm would mysteriously disappear the next day. Jiao was really scared at that time, but strangely, it was fine. Qin Hao thought for a while. Half a month ago, wasn't it the Fire Beacon Grand Banquet organized by Xintian Peak? The fact that there was no Imperial realm in the internal sea probably had something to do with Shenghua. He wanted to cultivate the Tao of billions of living beings, and naturally would not miss any Imperial realm. Half a month ago, Shenghua was also at the Fire Beacon Grand Banquet and could not leave, so Jiao was lucky to escape. It turns out that this monster is Big Brother's mount. Yi Shuihan breathed a sigh of relief. Human, watch your words. Jiao Ying's fierce eyes looked down at Yi Shuihan as if it could see through his divine soul, and the huge Emperor's shadow could suppress Yi Shuihan's mind. It was the overlord of the internal sea for generations. Although it had submitted to Qin Hao, it would not lower its dignity in front of others. Ahem, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that. Yi Shuihan smiled apologetically. He could sense that the 9-headed sea serpent cultivation was not simple, and it was not an ordinary Ocean Emperor. He looked at Qin Hao and said, since this Ocean Emperor is Big Brother's subordinate, it should not be difficult for us to cross the internal sea. Yes, Senior Brother Qin, we're counting on you. I've always thought that Senior Brother Qin was mighty and was the most powerful person in the Divine Palace. Now it proves that my feeling was right. You've subdued an Ocean Emperor before entering the Divine Palace. Such ability is much more outstanding than someone else. Many of the people present had become flatterers, but they had forgotten that they were also top figures. In the past, it was others who had flattered them. Ning Tianqing's face was not very good. These guys were obviously hinting at him. Jiao Ying's huge snake body twisted. Hearing others call him out, its 9 heads were obviously suppressing a burst of anger, but these people did not seem to be wrong. Everyone, Jiao Ying has indeed signed a master-servant contract with me, but it does not mean that it does not have the dignity of an emperor. In my eyes, its position is not a mount. I hope that my fellow disciples will not talk too much about this matter. Qin Hao coughed softly. Yes, we were rude. Senior Jiao, please forgive us. Many disciples bowed and apologized. They had to rely on the serpent to help them cross the internal sea later, and they really should not have angered it. Moreover, it was a great emperor and should be respected. Master, shall we set off immediately? Jiao Ying's expression eased a little as it asked Qin Hao. Its cultivation had been unsealed, and it was already a 2-star great emperor. Its strength was not the strongest among the thousands of demons in the internal sea, but there were definitely not many who could be stronger than it. There was always a hidden danger if it stayed in the internal sea. If it had not been waiting for Qin Hao, it might have run away long ago. Now, it wanted to leave as soon as possible. At this moment, the eyes of all the disciples present were fixed on Qin Hao's face. Under the Blood River, they did not know how Muri and Shenghua were fighting. If Muri was defeated, Shenghua could catch up with them at any time. Perhaps he would suddenly appear in the next second. Now, everyone's lives were in Qin Hao's hands. Only when he gave the order could they use Jiao Ying's power to return to their families. Chapter 1546. Next, any choice that Qin Hao made would affect the fate of everyone. Everyone looked at him, but Qin Hao did not respond. His eyes fell on the surface of the Blood River as if he could penetrate the endless blood and look at the bottom of the riverbed, and then a strong worry appeared. Silence spoke louder than words, and Xiao Han knew what he was thinking. He was waiting for Muri. I don't know how to persuade you. Senior sister risked her life to stop the evil soul and buy time for us to escape from the divine palace. She must be determined to die, and all this is to protect the orthodoxy of the Migres palace on you. We don't know the result of their fierce battle. Now, every second we stay, the danger is closer. It's good if senior sister wins, but if she loses... Xiao Han did not continue. The seriousness of failure was very clear in everyone's heart, and Qin Hao naturally also understood. Muri originally had the opportunity to leave the divine palace, but she endured for hundreds of years and had not left. The reason was very simple, to kill Shenghua. Now she gave the chance of survival to Qin Hao. If she lost, and Shenghua chased out of the divine palace, then Muri's sacrifice would be equivalent to being in vain. Big brother, I'm not discouraging you. We have all seen how tyrannical the evil soul is. Even if senior sister wants to escape, I'm afraid the chances are very slim. Xiaoguo whispered. After entering the great emperor realm, the spiritual power of warriors was extremely strong. In the face of an enemy of the same level, it was not difficult to escape if you could not win. But in front of Shenghua, it was not so easy. It could even be said that there was no possibility of survival. When they broke the enchantment, they could see the direction of the battle clearly. Muri was at a disadvantage, and it was almost impossible for her to escape from the evil soul after being injured. Qin Hao, I'm not afraid of death. If Shenghua really comes, the first person he will look for will be you. Think carefully, Zhou Wudao said. If the evil soul came, no one here would be spared, but Qin Hao would definitely be the first to be killed, in front of everyone, because he had taken the evil body of the other. Phew! Qin Hao exhaled and slowly looked away from the river. Shenghua's strength was too strong, far beyond what they could contend with at present. But to give up on Muri and leave alone was a bit heartless. However, senior sister did have the awareness and determination to die in the battle with Shenghua. She didn't even think about leaving. Qin Hao could also see this. As Xiao Han said, if Shenghua had a chance to catch up to them because of a moment of hesitation, Miori's sacrifice would have been in vain. Let's go. Qin Hao walked towards the nine-headed snakelet. The nine-headed snakelet's head was bent, and its central brain was prostrated on the ground, as though it was welcoming the great king in its heart. Qin Hao grabbed Xiao Han's hand and stepped on top of Jiu Ying's head. The rest of the people climbed onto the snake's broad back. They did not dare to step on the ocean monarch's head. Roar! With a roar, the nine-headed snakelet turned around and prepared to leave. However, at this moment, there was a sudden surge of water from the bottom of the blood river. Splashes of water spread out, as if there was an extremely powerful aura madly approaching. The nine-headed snakelet immediately became extremely uneasy. The power that was constantly approaching was extremely powerful, causing the depths of its soul to tremble. The river water surged wildly, and countless huge bubbles appeared. Waves of blood-like waves sprayed into the air. The vast fallen Emperor Bei was trembling. What's going on? Everyone's expression changed drastically. Countless gazes looked down as if a monster would suddenly emerge from the surging river water. Roar! The nine-headed snakelet became even more agitated. As the powerful aura approached, it even lost the courage to leave. The space became extremely silent. On the huge snake's body, the bodies of the disciples began to tremble. They stared unblinkingly at the river water, their eyes filled with fear. Who was this aura that was crazily approaching them? Shenghua or Miori? In comparison, the possibility of Shenghua catching up was higher. The space became somewhat suffocating. The evil shadow appeared in everyone's hearts again. Many people looked desperate. Boom! Torrents of blood flew up. A body wrapped in Emperor's light flew up from below. At that moment, it was as if the will of heaven and earth had been replaced by this body. The powerful force swept across. The nine-headed snakelet's huge snake body was as weak as a baby. It was pushed back crazily and almost fell into the river water. Looking at the majestic emperor's body in midair, the ocean emperor who dominated the internal sea actually trembled crazily. Fortunately, she was not Shenghua, Senior's sister. Qin Hao was pleasantly surprised. In midair, Miori was wearing a tattered Migres palace uniform. Although she was covered in wounds, she had finally returned safely. Let's go. Let's leave first. Miori's aura fluctuated violently. She could no longer maintain it. She weakly stepped on the nine-headed snakelet's head. As she landed, her body swayed. Qin Hao reacted quickly and supported her in time. Roar! Without Qin Hao's urging, the moment Miori dissipated her emperor's will, the nine-headed snakelet was released. It immediately swam wildly toward the internal sea. The strength of this human woman was something it had never seen before. She was like a goddess who suppressed all living things. Now, even the goddess was injured to this extent. One could only imagine what kind of terrifying existence was hiding in the blood river of Emperor Bei. Chapter 1547. In the vast inland sea, it was boundless. In the turbid waters, a giant nine-headed snake swam recklessly towards the southern region. Among the 9 heads, the nine-headed snakelet was in the middle. The other 8 heads stretched forward rhythmically. They were like 8 stallions, dragging their snake-like bodies that were densely covered in black scales. The journey was very peaceful. The nine-headed snakelet did not dare to make any noise to avoid disturbing Miori's cultivation. But just the demonic emperor aura that it emitted was enough to make many sea demons in the inland sea flee. At this moment, the nine-headed snakelet's broad back was filled with figures. At a glance, there were more than 300 people. Of course, these 300 people were not all of those who had escaped from the divine palace, but they made up at least 2/3 of the disciples. As for the others, their whereabouts were unknown. Qin Hao did not find any member of the Xinyuan family among the 300 people. Changhao Lo was not among them either. The divine palace had been destroyed, and the nightmare had ended. Since they had escaped, even if they were not far from Qin Hao, they would have tried their best to get out of Qin Hao's range of perception. The moment they stepped out of the celestial palace, the two sides were mortal enemies. With the forces gathered around Qin Hao, it would be a piece of cake for him to eliminate Chang Helua and the Xinyuan family. How would they dare to show themselves? However, the outcome would be the same sooner or later. The Xinyuan family would be completely wiped out from the southern region. At this moment, a figure in a blue robe stood. Yi Shuihan looked at the vast sea. He extended his human emperor's soul consciousness into the distance, as though he was searching for something in the inland sea, but he found nothing. He could not help but look at Qin Hao, who was on the nine-headed snakelet's head, with envy in his eyes. He sighed slightly and said, "Forget it. How can all the experts who have subdued the Ocean Emperor be like boss?" Yi Shuihan was the overlord of the East Sea region, the Fey Arch. However, in the North Sea region, there was also a powerful sea dragon beast. Back then, when Yi Shuihan and company arrived on a ship, the ship was sunk by the sea dragon beast. Many Shiliang warriors died in battle. Finally, Yi Shuihan lured the sea dragon beast away, allowing Qin Yun and company to luckily escape death. To this day, Yi Shuihan was still thinking about the golden sea dragon beast. Although its cultivation level was not as high as Jiu Ying's, it was still extremely ferocious. If it could submit to him like Jiu Ying, it would be wonderful. Unfortunately, Yi Shuihan did not have enough strength to gain the sea dragon's approval. "Senior sister, are you feeling better?" Qin Hao moved closer to Miuri and looked at her with concern. 10 days had passed since the battle with Shanghua. It wouldn't be long before they could return to the shores of the southern continent. Over the past few days, Qin Hao had been using the tranquil water to treat Miuri's injuries. Currently, Miuri's external injuries had all healed. However, the internal injuries she had suffered, especially from the corrosion of the laws from the evil Soul Emperor's will, were not something that Qin Hao could suppress. "I'm basically fine now." Miuri opened her eyes slightly. In her clear eyes, there was still some fatigue from the battle. In that battle, she had really gambled with her life. The evil soul gathered the spirits of all evil to refine numerous types of laws, and the offensive might of every single law and Tao insight was extremely formidable. If it wasn't for you forcing out the evil energy within my body, it would probably require at least 100 years to completely disperse his Tao insight attacks. Miuri looked at Qin Hao and said. Her expression was complicated. It was hard to imagine that this little junior brother of Migre's palace had actually swallowed the evil soul's ultimate god evil body that had been refined for 10,000 years. Not only had he swallowed it, but he had also completely refined it and merged it into his body. Qin Hao's body contained an extremely strong evil power. The ability that Shanghua displayed would appear in Qin Hao's body sooner or later. Although he could not control it now, it was easy for him to draw the evil power out of Miuri's body. If not for this, not to mention a mere 10 days. Even after 100 years, Miuri might not be able to get better. That's good. Qin Hao smiled in relief. The matter of devouring the evil body was not his original intention at that time. He only wanted to take back the wind form of the wind, who knew that the essence blood of the gods and devils would actually suck the evil fetus into his body. He was completely helpless. However, looking at the current situation, it was not a bad thing. On the contrary, the evil power in his body gave Qin Hao the opportunity to find the evil soul's weakness. The evil soul was too strong. It was undying and indestructible. It was not an exaggeration to call it a demigod. If he did not take the evil fetus, Qin Hao really could not find a way to defeat it. But you must be very careful in the future. The evil soul lost the evil body and will definitely run all over the continent to find you. Miuri warned. If he did not take back the evil body, the evil soul would definitely not give up. Qin Hao nodded solemnly. He was being pestered. He asked, "By the way, senior sister, that battle, how did you come out?" Qin Hao naturally asked about the result of the battle between Miuri and Shanghua, but he did not use the word escape to describe Miuri. Senior sister was the only remaining orthodox preacher of the Divine Palace. She had a sacred belief that could not be blasphemed. What's more, senior brother Eastern Sky had also said that senior sister's talent was not below his. An outstanding woman, like senior sister, must have extremely high self-esteem. It's strange. Logically speaking, I should be far from being Shenghua's opponent. But when we fought, I found that his cultivation had not reached the Nirvana realm. He was far from Master Migres. At most, he was at the peak of the unblemished realm. That's why I was able to delay him for so long. Miuri also showed a puzzled expression. Back then, Miuri challenged Eastern Sky as the peak seat of Daozong Peak. Eastern Sky was not there, and Migres Peak only had Miuri. She had no reason to avoid fighting for the peak of Daozong Peak. Eastern Sky's obsession should have mentioned it to you, right? I was not in a good state at that time. There was karma in my heart, so I could not break through to the Emperor realm. Qin Hao nodded and listened carefully. I won't say much about the fight. In short, Mu did block the Emperor's tribulation for me. But if a warrior does not accept the baptism of the Emperor's tribulation, even if his cultivation reaches the Emperor realm, he can't refine his Emperor realm body and become a real emperor. Qin Hao was someone who had been through this before, so he understood. Only by experiencing the power of the Emperor's tribulation could one completely step into the Emperor realm. In order to protect Miuri's life, Mu bore the Emperor's tribulation for her. But at the same time, he also deprived her of the opportunity to enter the Emperor realm. At that moment, I entered a very strange state. It was as if my spiritual soul had left my body and floated into the void, merging with the great path. As for what happened outside, I had no idea. My consciousness was completely integrated with some kind of will, and I fell into a state of enlightenment. But I knew that it was not a real spiritual soul leaving the body, but a kind of martial will leaving the body. It may be difficult to understand. Have you heard of the primordial soul leaving the body? Miuri asked. Primordial soul leaving the body? Qin Hao and Xiao Han looked at each other. The two nodded, but then shook their heads. When a warrior becomes a venerable, he gathers his spiritual soul. But what was the primordial soul? The primordial soul is the willpower of a divine-level expert. I don't know the specific use and power. Back then, Master occasionally mentioned it, but I didn't pay attention. When I was fighting with Mu, I accidentally summoned the Emperor's tribulation. Unfortunately, I couldn't be baptized by the Emperor's tribulation. The situation is similar to the primordial soul leaving the body. It is a kind of willpower that transcends the body, not the spiritual soul. The spiritual soul is still in the body. Because of this, I stayed in the Divine Palace for many years, but the evil soul still couldn't sense my existence. Miuri's tone was a little proud, but there was great sadness in her eyes. When the primordial soul left the body and merged with the will of the great path, she had no idea what happened outside. It was probably at that moment that the evil soul broke out from Uni Peak and washed the Divine Palace with blood. The people of the Eastern Sky were all killed. When Miuri regained consciousness, she found that she had stepped into the martial Emperor realm, and her vitality had turned platinum. But she didn't know that the Divine Palace in front of her had been destroyed long ago, and that the people of the Eastern Sky had been dead for a long time. She ran excitedly in front of Tian Quan, gesticulating like a silly girl, and told her enlightenment, wanting to share the surprise with her master. However, the reality in front of her was too cruel. Her master couldn't see her. Everyone in the Divine Palace completely ignored Miuri. At that moment, she became the dead person in everyone's mouth. Chapter 1548. Miuri had always existed in the form of an astral projection. During this period, she did not have any soul power fluctuations, nor did she have any aura. She was completely a body of will, detached from the physical body, and witnessed everything in the Divine Palace. She saw Migres often wallowing in grief alone. She saw Dongtian carefully taking care of her attic. She also saw Chang Yu holding a 5-colored emperor's net immortal grass in a daze all day long. She also saw Mu falling into deep self-blame because of guilt. She could only watch helplessly unable to appease anyone. This kind of pain and torture could not be understood by others. Over time, she got used to it. Following this, Miaoli would no longer grieve for those obsessions. She had already become numb. She was lucky enough to find her body and hid it away. She used the primordial spirit state to cultivate with all her might. There was only one thought left in her heart, and that was revenge. She knew very well that the person who died was not herself, but the divine palace was destroyed. She vowed to catch the mastermind behind the scenes and destroy it at all costs. New disciples continued to pour into the divine palace. Many of them were very talented, not inferior to her and Eastern Sky. Unfortunately, they died in the blood cave of Uni Peak Midway, and their souls were refined by the evil soul. Muri found out that the murderer was Shenghua. Sadly, Shenghua's cultivation was too strong, and Muri was no match for him. She could only continue to endure. She tried to improve herself, and often went to the peaks to listen to their teachings. Although the peak masters left behind their obsessions, their understanding and comprehension of martial arts were still at the nirvana level. Until Qin Hao's batch of disciples came in, Muri did not feel anything at that time. She thought that they would also become nourishment for the evil soul. However, she never expected that someone in this batch of disciples would be able to see her. Speaking of which, I was really shocked by you. At that moment, I was very nervous, afraid that your attention would lead to an anomaly. Muri looked at Qin Hao and said. Qin Hao lowered his head and smiled. This was why Senior's sister avoided him. Even so, I still didn't have any thoughts about you. You were too weak. Instead of wasting time on you, it was better to let you fend for yourself, and I wholeheartedly improved my cultivation and fought with Shenghua. Maybe I was lonely for too long and wanted to find someone to talk to, so I entered the illusory palace through the trial array. Muri saved Qin Hao in the illusory palace once. It was also at that time that she found that Qin Hao was indeed different. Not only could he see the essence of all things, but through Qin Hao's body, she could also release her cultivation to the outside world and use it on the creatures of the illusory palace. This made her change her mind. She thought that perhaps Qin Hao's potential was stronger than hers. In addition, Eastern Sky's obsession was especially attentive to Qin Hao, which had never happened to the previous batch of disciples. Although some disciples of the previous batches had entered the Migrez Palace, Eastern Sky and Changyu's obsession was not too strong. On the contrary, when facing Qin Hao, Eastern Sky seemed to have come back to life. His obsession was no longer cold, and he used all kinds of methods to train and teach Qin Hao. Perhaps this is your fate with Eastern Sky, or he saw his own shadow in you, which affected his obsession. I decided that no matter what, I would send you away from this disaster. Muri said. After saving Qin Hao in the illusory palace, she made up her mind. Even though her cultivation had reached the unblemished Great Emperor, she was still not sure that she could fight against Shenghua. However, she was willing to gamble with her life. If she died, there would be another disciple of the Migrez Palace who was better than her in the world to pass on the orthodoxy of the Divine Palace. Speaking of this, Qin Hao and Xiao Han's eyes reddened. Eastern Sky was really good to them. He was like an elder brother and cared for them in every way. After Daozong Peak suppressed Shermu, they directly allowed Xiao Han to cultivate in the Migrez Palace. Xiao Han's ability to step into the Emperor realm in the illusory palace had a lot to do with Eastern Sky's training. Don't be sad. I know that Eastern Sky's obsession dissipated without a trace of regret. His spirit lives on in you. Muri comforted. So after the trial in the illusory palace, Senior Sister's primordial spirit returned to your body? Qin Hao's voice was a little choked. Muri nodded. Yes, the evil soul can't detect the power of my will, and I have been cleansed by the Emperor's tribulation. I am a real, unblemished great Emperor. Only when my primordial spirit returns can my cultivation be released. It took a long time for the primordial spirit to return to the body and merge with it. Moreover, Muri was inexperienced and had been in an out-of-body state for many years. When she tried to complete that step, she found that it was still too late. She couldn't see the obsession of the Migres palace for the last time. Qin Hao and the others had experienced everything that happened next. Hao was the evil soul now. Qin Hao clenched his fist and asked. Muri shook her head. I don't know. I am no match for him. I was defeated as soon as Uncle Master Tai, Wei's longevity, tree, sent you away. It was only because a stranger suddenly broke in and stopped Shanghua that I had a chance to escape. A stranger? Qin Hao was surprised. What stranger? His cultivation was so powerful that he could stop Shanghua. Moreover, why didn't they see the stranger when they left? It has been 1,700 years since I started cultivating in the Divine Palace. Obviously, that person didn't come from me. Muri's tone was very certain. The appearance of that person must have a deep relationship with someone in Qin Hao's batch of disciples. Moreover, this person's cultivation was very high. It was not inferior to Muri's. At that time, she was surprised. When did an expert above the flawless emperor realm appear in the outside world? It was unimaginable in the past. He is so strong? Qin Hao was shocked. Such a cultivation was not weaker than his in his previous life. Senior sister, did you see what he looked like? No. Muri frowned and thought carefully. But he was a man. He was wearing a purple robe. The emperor's was very special. He had the majesty of a king. Because his back was to me, I didn't have the chance to see his appearance. A purple robe with the majesty of a king. Qin Hao muttered to himself, trying to search for the figure of the purple robe in his memory. But when he added up the memories of his 2 lives, there was no one who fit the description. There were many people who wore purple robes. After his rebirth, Chen Wanqin's father, Chen Kang, the palace master of the Fengli Temple of the Jiang Kingdom, liked to wear purple robes. But he was not an emperor at all. How could he have the majesty of a king? In addition, the Elixir Pavilion censor was also wearing a purple robe. This person rarely showed himself, and he seemed to be wrapped in a layer of mystery. Qin Hao couldn't see through him, but he faintly felt a sense of familiarity from him. But he was not an emperor. Hey, senior brothers and junior brothers, which family's great ancestor likes to wear purple robes? His cultivation is the 3rd realm of the emperor's path, the flawless emperor realm. Qin Hao stood up and shouted at the people on the snake's back. He did not know this purple-robed man, so he was most likely related to someone else. It seemed that he was riding on someone else's coattails. My father likes to wear purple robes, but he is not the flawless emperor. My family's great ancestor also wears purple robes. He is old, but he especially likes to disguise himself as a young man and show off everywhere. But his cultivation is not up to senior brother Qin's standards. I used to wear purple robes too. Everyone spoke at once. The habits of 8 generations of their ancestors were thrown out from their ancestral graves. Not only did they wear purple robes, but some people also wore purple underpants. But it was not important to this matter. Okay, that's enough. Qin Hao waved his hand with a headache. It seemed that there was no hope of finding this purple-robed cultivator. At this time, Lei Jiao, who was in the crowd, wanted to say something but stopped. His master, the Thunder Emperor of the East Continent, also wore purple robes, but his cultivation had not reached the flawless realm. Thinking of this, Lei Jiao swallowed his words. Chapter 1549. Qin Hao looked at Muri and shrugged helplessly. He didn't see his face, just his purple robe. Searching for clues was like looking for a needle in a haystack. Muri said calmly, "It doesn't matter. If we meet again, I can recognize him." Flawless the Great Emperor's aura was particularly special, and there should be very few people in the outside world who had such profound cultivation. If senior sister can recognize him, I will thank him. Qin Hao said, without this purple-robed, flawless the Great Emperor, Muri's life would be in danger, and his senior sister would be able to return safely. How could this help be repaid with just a big reward? He may not appreciate it, Muri said bluntly. Qin Hao froze in place, speechless. Senior sister, is there something on your mind? Xiao Han put a cloak on Muri's shoulder and saw that she seemed to have doubts. Muri took Xiao Han's hand and let her sit beside her. She took a deep breath and said, I suspect that Shanghua is not the original body of the evil soul. It may be a doppelganger. When the divine palace was destroyed and the 7 peak masters died, her primordial spirit left her body and merged with the great path. Although she didn't witness the tragic battle, the cultivation that Shanghua displayed 10 days ago was not enough to pose a threat to Migres. Shanghua couldn't even shake any of the 7 peaks of the divine palace. But the fact was that the 7 peaks were all destroyed, and the disciples of the divine palace were all wiped out. It can't be. Zhou Wudao's hair stood on end, and a cold feeling soaked his whole body. Not only Zhou Wudao, but on the broad snake back of the 9-headed fierce beast, all the disciples' faces were full of panic and shock. If Muri's guess was true, it was too terrible. Shanghua alone had made everyone fall into despair. Was it really just a doppelganger? Qin Hao's heart trembled slightly, and his expression was extremely solemn. Senior Sister's guess was not groundless. If Shanghua only had the ability of the Flawless Realm, how could he kill the 7 peak masters of Migres, as well as the chief disciples and elders of the Divine Palace? Perhaps my guess wasn't accurate. The evil soul refinement myriad spirit Tao insight might have a flaw in his cultivation that caused his cultivation to degenerate. Muri said again, even a true god would not be able to fully comprehend the will of Tao that had devoured billions of lives. Shenghua's extreme cultivation path of annihilation had never appeared before, so no one was sure if his method of using the evil spirit force was correct or not. Perhaps, Qin Hao said, unable to completely fuse the Taos of billions of living beings? Impossible. The evil wind was one of the 9 elements of the desolate era. It was extremely mysterious. The evil soul used the evil wind to crush all living beings and then fuse them together at the root. His method of devouring could not be wrong. In comparison, Qin Hao believed that it was more likely to be a clone. It was just that this result was a little hard to accept. In short, when you return to the mortal world this time, it's best not to mention what happened in the Divine Palace to anyone. Unless it's a matter of life and death, try not to use the Divine Palace Emperor's techniques. Miori's dignified gaze swept over the disciples. The disciples shuddered at the same time and respectfully replied, "We will follow Senior Sister's orders." This was not a restriction, but Miori was sincerely doing it for their own good. If Shanghua had another evil soul, once their identities were exposed, they would definitely die without a burial place, and many people who escaped would be implicated. Miori could not care about other people's lives, but she had to be careful about Qin Hao's safety. He was her only junior brother of the Tao Peak. In order to fulfill Eastern Sky's last wish and protect Qin Hao's growth, she would not allow anyone to threaten Qin Hao's safety. The disciples also had no objections. It was a matter of life and death. Who would not cherish their own life? As for how to explain it to their families, they could just casually find a reason. They had only been in the Divine Palace for 3 years. If they came out after 3 years of cultivation, even if they told their elders, the upper echelons of their families would not believe them. They could just say that they had lost their way during the voyage. "Senior Sister, what are your plans next?" Qin Hao asked. "I will watch over you first. When you step into the great Emperor realm, I will return to the family to meet the descendants. I will also make a trip to Qilin Taoist Mountain and do what I can for Eastern Sky." Muri replied. Her master was no longer here, and, as the eldest sister, she was like a mother. Of course, she had the responsibility to watch over her. Qin Hao was speechless. "Do you have any objections?" Muri said in a low voice. "No, you are indeed my senior sister." Qin Hao shrunk his neck. Even his tone was the same as his 2 senior brothers. They were indeed close. "Senior sister, your hair." Xiaohan's hand stroked Miori's hair on her shoulder. He looked at the hair that was gradually turning white in his palm. Moreover, at some point, there were traces of wind and frost on her face. There were many wrinkles at the corners of her eyes. She was aging step by step. "It's just the end of the lifespan. This will happen. Don't be nervous." Muri smiled casually. Qin Hao lowered his head and didn't say anything else. His senior sister entered the divine palace before the age of 30. Even though she kept her primordial spirit in an out-of-body state, her actual lifespan was already 1,700 years old. She had indeed reached the limit of the unblemished Great Emperor realm. If she couldn't step into the Nirvana realm soon, she would pass away soon. This was something that even pills couldn't save her. Senior sister, I will listen to you in the future. Qin Hao lowered his head and said. Muri smiled slightly. She slowly raised her gaze and looked at the endless void. God realm could transcend reincarnation. The divine palace was the holy land of the mortal world that gave birth to gods. However, after the martial monarch realm ancestor, there was no more god realm ascension. The peak venerables of each generation had the supreme belief of becoming a god. It was probably because of this that a monster like Shanghua was born from the fusion of countless peak venerables' evil souls. Another 5 days passed. Everyone finally stepped onto the land of the southern region and entered the territory of the proud northern divine nation. The nine-headed snakelet's speed wasn't slow. And at this moment, at a port in the northernmost part of proud northern god nation, there were countless soldiers of Leaf family gathered. Their bearing was solemn, just like statues standing on both sides of the port, silently watching the huge crowd that had just stepped onto the port. This group of people, the average age was not old, but each of them had an extraordinary temperament. Each of them was extremely outstanding and belonged to the type that was hard to forget after a glance. This group of people was the disciples of the Divine Palace, led by Qin Hao. Everyone, since you have come to my Leaf family's territory, why don't you let Yaki do his duty as a host and follow me to the imperial capital? My father will be very happy to see everyone. The seventh prince of the proud northern divine nation, Liyaki, faced the disciples of the Divine Palace and invited them warmly. He once had an unforgettable grudge with Qin Hao, but that was all in the past. After experiencing the catastrophe of the Divine Palace, it was not worth mentioning in comparison. And this group of disciples of the Divine Palace in front of him, any one of them was a proud genius from all over the continent. Not only were they talented, but most of them were direct disciples of princes and emperors. It might not be so obvious when they were in the Divine Palace, but once they returned to the outside world, this network was very strong. Liyaki certainly hoped to firmly stabilize this relationship. Junior brother Li cough. One of them opened his mouth and noticed Muri's sharp eyes looking at him. His tone suddenly changed, and he corrected himself. Your Highness Yaki doesn't need to be so polite. After 3 years of wandering, we are very homesick. There will be plenty of time to visit in the future. This all right. Liyaki could understand. After which, he glanced at Qin Hao as a look of struggle flickered in his eyes. But very quickly, he felt relieved in his heart. Thanks to Brother Qin for saving my life, all grudges of the past shall be written off. If there's anything you need, just say the word. Mali clan will definitely be there. Liyaki was very clear about the bad relationship between Qin Hao and the Xianyuan clan of the proud southern divine nation. This time he came back alive. With Muri, the flawless great emperor, by his side, the Xianyuan clan would suffer. Their Leaf family of the proud northern divine nation had always been at odds with the proud southern divine nation. They had always wanted to annex them. It was better to take this opportunity to join forces and remove the Xianyuan clan from the southern divine nation. Qin Hao could hear the hidden meaning in Liyaki's words. In the past, the Leaf family would never easily join forces with him, but now that his senior sister was here, the fate of the Xianyuan clan was set. Liyaki wanted a share of the pie. However, it didn't matter. One more friend meant one more path. Your Highness is too kind. I won't be polite, Qin Hao said with a smile. Chapter 1550. The two nodded tacitly, understanding each other's thoughts. Unknowingly, the two sides had reached an agreement to conquer the Xianyuan clan. The storm was coming, and the situation in the southern region was about to change dramatically. Many peerless geniuses from the East continent were confused. The two seemed to be hiding something. Could it be that Qin Hao had encountered some obstacles? A genius from the East Continent stepped forward and said, "Brother Qin, if you have any difficulties, you can tell us. We are willing to do our best." Yes, yes, we are willing to do our best for Brother Qin. We are friends. Brother Qin's business is everyone's business. Don't you think so? Yes, yes. Everyone gradually realized that they were all willing to contribute their strength. Liaki looked at this group of people strangely. They were all so proactive. They were about to start a war with the imperial family. Many people would die. Why were these guys joining in the fun? When he noticed Miori behind Qin Hao, Liaki's face trembled slightly. He suddenly felt that these guys were very smart. Miori's current status was equivalent to the living lord of the Divine Palace. Everyone was in awe of her. Moreover, her strength was extremely strong. How many unblemished emperors could there be in the outside world? As long as they could have a relationship with Miori, if the major families were in trouble in the future, this preacher of the Divine Palace would not stand idly by. Smart. They were all too smart. Besides, Qin Hao had saved their lives. He had to pay back what he owed. I really need your help. Follow the coast of the northern Ao kingdom all the way south. In a few days, we will reach Brother Zhang's territory. Why don't you come with me? I believe the elders of the Zheng clan will be very happy. Qin Hao smiled cheekily. More than 300 elites of the Divine Palace stood out from tens of millions of candidates. They had survived until the end and were taught by the Seven Peak Masters. This was an extremely terrifying combat force. Under the imperial realm, these 300 people were invincible. They were just enough to restrain the Renhuang power of the Xinyuan clan. I have the same idea. I have long wanted to go to Brother Zheng's house. Brother Zheng, you must treat us well and take us to see the beautiful scenery of the Zheng dynasty. Everyone rushed towards Zheng Qingqi. Looking at their excited and joyful expressions, they were simply like Zheng Qingqi's life and death brothers. Of course, Zheng Qingqi blushed with shame. He raised his head to look at Qin Hao. This level of influence was indeed worthy of being the first seat of the Migres Hall. Sigh, I can't compare myself to others. Liaki flicked his sleeve coldly. In fact, he really wanted to spit at this group of disciples of the Divine Palace. He had sincerely sent out an invitation. Not only did no one respond, but they were also looking for excuses to avoid him. Qin Hao gestured slightly, and, as a result, everyone scrambled to go over. Brother Ning, what do you think? Qin Hao looked at Ning Tianxing again. He used to address him as Brother Tianxing. However, after the incident at the Divine Palace, Ning Tianxing left a bad impression on him, and their relationship slowly drifted apart. However, now that they had returned to the outside world, the Zheng dynasty and martial tranquility nation still had an alliance. When one side took action, the other side naturally had to respond. Of course, with Qin Hao's current strength, he didn't need Ning Wu's cooperation at all, so he just asked out of courtesy. I need to report to the Great Ancestor. There shouldn't be a problem. Ning Tianxing replied. He had ascended to the position of Crown Prince and controlled the martial tranquility nation, but this was no small matter. Once the war began, there was no turning back. This war would be very fierce, and the Xinyuan family was not to be trifled with. He had to consider the martial tranquility nation. Okay, Qin Hao nodded. It was meaningless for the martial tranquility faction to not send troops. He looked at Liaki and said, Your Highness, please send a void warship. Lei Jiao, Qin Ning, Feng Qinli, Hai Sha, and everyone else come with me. Lei Jiao's face darkened. Why did he feel like he had boarded a pirate ship? He hadn't agreed yet. Buzz. The void warship slowly rose into the air, and a stream of light flew thousands of feet away, gradually disappearing in the direction of the Zheng dynasty. The Xinyuan family is completely finished. Liaki sighed as he watched the stream of light fly away. Even the Daluo immortals couldn't save him. The Xinyuan clan had dominated the southern region for thousands of years. The Xinyuan clan was an equal to the Li clan. Another few days passed. The southern region was like spring all year round, and the scenery was pleasant. Because of the geographical advantage, the people living here were very comfortable. At this time, in the vast land between the southern proud empire and the former prosper nation, several mountains rose from the ground. Looking from the endless plains, it was very majestic and gave people a sense of majesty. This was the holy land of the Music Palace, a first-rate sect in the southern region. On the peaks of several mountains, glorious palaces stood. In mid-air, many floating islands were arranged, setting off the main peak as beautiful as a fairyland. A soothing melody drifted between heaven and earth, causing those who listened to it to become intoxicated and forget to return. The Music Palace's musical skills were the best in the southern region, attracting countless musicians to seek the Tao. Since ancient times, the sect had nurtured the most outstanding musical talents. However, compared to the past, the music coming from the various peaks of the Music Palace added a sense of celebration. At this time, there were countless busy figures moving up and down the Music Palace. Many outstanding talents of the southern region, as well as famous experts, had arrived. They had come to celebrate. Today was the 600th birthday of the Music Palace's Supreme Elder. It was said that after the birthday, the Supreme Elder of the Music Palace would attempt to break through to the Emperor realm in front of all the guests. Birthday breakthrough, double happiness. Chapter 1551. The main peak of Music Palace was surrounded by white clouds. Above the clouds, one could vaguely see a dazzling immortal palace. It was as dazzling as an immortal palace, giving people the feeling of a pilgrimage. A melodious tune came from the immortal palace. It was vigorous and majestic. At the foot of the mountain, a straight jade staircase extended up into the clouds and connected to the immortal palace. On both sides of the jade staircase, countless Music Palace disciples stood respectfully. Their clothes were neat and tidy, and their postures were straight. They had set up a ceremony to welcome the powerful seniors who had come from all over the southern region. These seniors had all come to celebrate the patriarch's birthday. One figure after another walked up the jade staircase. No one was flying, and they were all walking. They carried heavy gifts in their hands, and their faces were full of smiles. At a glance, there were thousands of people who had arrived at the Immortal Palace's square. It was enough to show how famous the Music Palace's Grand Elder was, and there was still an endless stream of people coming to celebrate. The birthday banquet was held at the Immortal Palace's square. Because there were so many people, the Immortal Palace could not accommodate them. In an incomparably wide square, there were slender, long tables. Under the tables, there was a luxurious blanket for guests to sit. The long tables were densely packed. The front and back, the left and right were all very orderly. There was no room for error. At this moment, many guests were seated. The guests looked at the Immortal Palace. In front of the Immortal Palace, there was a long dragon table made of gold. The table was completely filled with delicacies, but no one dared to sit on that table. It belonged to the birthday boy, the Music Palace's Grand Elder, Yulushin. There were also many empty seats beside the dragon-shaped table. There were very few people who could sit there. Only the upper echelons of the 3 emperors and 4 sects were qualified to sit there. As for the small sects, they could only sit in the square. Even so, those who came to celebrate the birthday were proud of it. After all, not everyone was qualified to sit at the Music Palace's Grand Elder's birthday banquet. Palace Lord and long time no see. A loud laugh was heard. A mighty old man walked forward with majestic steps. He walked all the way to the dragon table. At this moment, there was a middle-aged man in luxurious robes. He was handsome and had an extraordinary temperament. It was the Palace Lord of Zhongla Palace and Sui. Although Sui was the Palace Lord, the one who truly represented the sects while above him was Grand Elder Yulushin. Pavilion Lord Ji, you came in person. Palace Master and stepped out with a smile and greeted the Pavilion Master of Rune Source Pavilion. Pavilion Lord? Elder Ming of the Sword Sect is here. Arhut Hall Master San Luo and 4 Luo Hall Masters are here to celebrate. Boom! The 3 voices rang out. Everyone in the square immediately stood up. Sword Sect, Sage Temple, and Arhut Hall. 3 of the 4 top sect masters had sent people here. This face. Ha ha. This old man is just an elder of a lousy sect. How could you all come here personally? It's my honor, my honor. Bold laughter rang out in the hall. Then everyone saw the supreme elder of Lu Palace step out and personally greet the people of the 3 sects. Elder Lu, congratulations. Elder Meng waved his hand. A disciple of the sword sect behind him presented an immortal sword and handed it to Lu Palace's apprentice. Elder Qi of the Blazing Sun Temple took out a small furnace from his sleeve and said with a serious face, "There's a wisp of Yang's spirit flame in this furnace. This is too precious. Please take a seat." LVXAN gave the apprentice beside him a look. The apprentice carefully took it as if he was inviting a god. The Lord of the Sage Temple, Yang's spirit, a 9-star great emperor. He had the same status as Xinyuan Gaoyan. He had the power of fire. The Tao fire he condensed contained the martial will of the great emperor. Not only could it be comprehended by the disciples of Lu Palace, but the other elders, including Palace Master and Lu LVXN, could also comprehend the martial will of the great emperor from the Tao fire. It was extremely precious. Ha ha, congratulations. You old fart, you're about to step into the great emperor realm. A shirtless man with bulging muscles said. He was full of strength. Old fart. Lu LVXN's face suddenly changed, but he quickly recovered and said with a smile, "Lord San Luo, it's working. I was lucky to see the opportunity of the great emperor realm." "Then you're just lucky." Ha ha, we didn't bring any gifts. Another burly man laughed. His voice was like thunder. His laugh caused the faces of everyone in the music palace to darken. While the Arhut Temple was one of the top 4 sects, and the Luo Emperor himself was incomparably ferocious, and the 9 Hall Lords under his command were all ferocious, today was the birthday of the Supreme Elder of the Music Palace, and they had called him an old fart. That was too rude and presumptuous. Unfortunately, the vast void was silent, and the person he was waiting for did not arrive. The Martial Ning Empire and the Northern Pride Leaf family probably wouldn't send anyone over. Lu LVXN secretly sighed and looked up. His face regained its vigor as he walked to the table and picked up a cup of wine. He solemnly raised it towards the sky and said, "Old man's birthday. This first cup of wine is a toast to the heaven and earth, to thank this land for its nurturing, allowing the old man to see through the Emperor's Tao and heaven's mysteries. May the martial Tao of the southern domain prosper and heroes emerge one after another." After that, the wine cups slowly tilted and the fragrant wine poured out at his feet. "To the heaven and earth, may the martial Tao of the southern domain prosper and heroes emerge one after another." In the square, thousands of experts stood up at the same time and solemnly raised their cups to the heaven. The second cup of wine is a toast to the ancestors of the music palace. They passed down their sound techniques to me. May the sect prosper. May the disciples' future be boundless. Lu LVXIN turned to face the immortal palace, picked up the cup and drank. Seniors of the music palace, Old Meng of the sword sect, Old Qi of the temple, and Nan Ao, general, all looked solemn. Even the 2 bold Arhut Hall masters restrained their frivolity and became incomparably serious. Although the people present were from different sects, no matter which sect they were from, they were all the pride of the southern domain. For example, sects with a long history like the 3 emperors and 4 sects, the music palace, and the origin of Rune's pavilion had given birth to countless seniors that were worthy of respect. It was precisely those seniors that had created the current prosperity of the Southern Territory, so they should be respected. This third cup of wine is a toast to the heroes who have spared no effort to come to the Music Palace to participate in the birthday banquet. The old man's heart is filled with gratitude. As the Taoist child filled the cup, LVXN once again raised it, bowed deeply, and drank with tears in his eyes. He was indeed very emotional. Congratulations to Elder Lu for seeing the Emperor realm and becoming one of the top forces of the Southern Domain. No one dared to neglect and shouted in unison. Lu LVXIN had reached the great circle of the Emperor realm. After the birthday banquet, he would summon the Emperor Tribulation and be baptized by the Emperor Tribulation to forge his Emperor body. From today onwards, the Music Palace would also step into the top Overlord forces. The main difference between the top forces and the Overlord forces was that the former had no Emperor, while the latter had the support of Emperor Realm. Once Lu LVXAN became an Emperor, the sect would naturally rise by one level.